Wow, what an incredible performance. Truly something special.
Really, no better way to light up the morning than set the energy for the day, I say. And now that we are all energized, are we energized? Are we ready? Can we hear a louder roar than that? Are we ready? Great. And now that we're all energized, let's dive into today's agenda.
It's super exciting. We have a lot of really exciting discussions ahead, so we keep this momentum going non-stop.
Oh, absolutely. We're now set to explore a topic that couldn't be more relevant. Boom or bust. Deciphering global and local economic tides. Navigating the ups and downs of today's complex economic landscape requires more than just keen insight. It demands the perspective of someone who's seen it all. And that's why we are absolutely thrilled to have with us Professor Nouriel Roubini. She's Professor Emeritus at the Stern School of Business, New York University, and CEO of Roubini Macro Associates. Often dubbed Dr. Doom, for his prescient warnings, he prefers Dr. Realist, reflecting his commitment to facing the hard truths of our global economy.
And you know, as George Bernard Shaw once said, the optimist invents the aeroplane, the pessimist, the parachute. Well, with Nouriel here, I think it's safe to say we have ourselves the best parachute designer in the business.
Absolutely.
His predictions may feel like a little bit of a bumpy ride, but they're exactly what we need to land safely.
And joining him will be Nilesh Shah, a veteran in India's financial sector and currently Group President and Managing Director of Kotak Mutual Fund, who's going to help us explore how India can navigate these turbulent times. Please join us in giving a very, very warm welcome to Professor Nouriel Roubini and Nilesh Shah to the stage.
Good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure to moderate questions with Dr. Nouriel Roubini, Dr. Doom Parma Bear, but in our interaction before, I have found a warm, very intelligent, insightful person. So in next half an hour, I'll try to bring his views to you. Dr. Roubini, you wrote about 10 mega threats in 2022. How have you seen them evolve over the last 2 years? And what should we be doing to convert them into mega opportunities rather than remain mega threats?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's really a great pleasure and honor to come back to India and Delhi. I was earlier this year a couple of times in China, and you arrive to Beijing and there is a sense of funk, almost like mood is down, while as soon as you're out of the airport in Delhi, you feel the vibrancy and the energy of a society, economy, and political system that is strong, dynamic, vibrant, and so on. So it's always great being here. It's a wonderful country, wonderful people. You asked me about my book. I wrote in 2022 a book titled Mega Threats, 10 Dangerous Trends in Endanger Our Future and How to Survive Them. And unfortunately, I would say that some of the trends that I discuss in the books are becoming worse. One of them, of course, is that we live in a world of a geopolitical recession, if not a depression. There's already a hot war between Russia and Ukraine. Unfortunately, it's getting worse. It's not getting any better. We'll see what will be the end of it. There is a war in the Middle East between Israel and Hamas. It could escalate in a full conflict involving Iran and Hezbollah. There is a Cold War between US and China. This Cold War by many dimensions becoming colder, and people are asking themselves now whether it's going to eventually end up into a hot war on the issue of Taiwan or the South China Sea. And of course, we also have now the US elections. We don't know what are going to be the results. We're going to discuss them, but it could be a source, depending on the results of this election, of tensions, not just domestically, but also geopolitically. The consequences of this geopolitical depression is that we live in a world in which we've gone from a period of time where there was hyper-globalization, too much maybe trade in goods and services and movement of capital, labor, data, technology, information, to now a process of gradual deglobalization or decoupling or de-risking. It's driven by geopolitics, but it's also driven by the fact that globalization has winners and losers, that people are left behind, and those who are left behind having a backlash. So now we talk about protectionism, about industrial policies, about reshoring, friendshoring, about emphasizing global supply chains and their own security, and economic security over economic efficiency in the allocation of resources. There are restrictions increasingly to movements of capital, of labor, of data, information, and technology. It's going to become a more fragmented world, maybe safer from a geopolitical point of view because of the risky, but one is fragmented in ways that reduces growth and increases cost of production and inflation. We live also in a world in which debt ratios, private and public debt, are rising. And before COVID, interest rates were very low. 0 if not negative policy rates in advanced economies, 0 if not negative even long-term interest rates in advanced economies. And now with the rise in inflation, normalization of monetary policies, interest rates are high. And therefore, whether there are countries or governments or households or corporations or banking system or financial system, they'll be under stress because of this rise in interest rates. So debt service ratios are rising. That's going to become the economy much more fragile. There's a huge issue with global climate change, and every day there is a natural disaster. And unfortunately, this is not a natural disaster, it's a man-made disaster. And while COP, whether it was Sharm el-Sheikh or Dubai or Glasgow, has lofty goals, there is too much greenwashing and greenwishing, and very little is being done significantly to address it. Given current policies, we may not be at 1.5 above pre-industrial level, not even 2, but trending towards 2.4. So much more needs to be done for global climate change. Otherwise, the economic, fiscal, and human cost of it are going to be severe. We had a huge pandemic, and for reasons I cannot discuss right now, pandemics are going to become more virulent and more frequent than the past, in part related to global climate change, because as we destroy animal ecosystems, those animals that carry pathogens, like pangolins, bats, and others, get closer to livestock and human, and therefore the zoonotic transmission of diseases from animal to human become more frequently. In the last 40 years, we've had HIV, SARS, MERS, swine flu, bird flu, Zika, Ebola, now COVID-19. There'll be more of them, unfortunately, and that's a severe problem. We saw the consequences of COVID. Demographic trends are also a big issue. There is aging of population in advanced economies, but also in some important emerging markets like China, Russia, Korea, and others, and there is population growth in other ones. And in some societies like Sub-Saharan Africa, climate change, lack of water, desertification, collapse of agriculture is leading to movement into town, to civil collapse, to economic and political tensions, even civil wars and mass migration. But now the movement of people from south to north, from poor to rich, is restricted because, rightly or wrongly, US, Europe, and advanced economies are restricting migration as well. We also have an increase in both income inequality and income insecurity. And in some countries, that leads to a backlash against liberal democracy and democratic capitalism. And how to make growth inclusive and sustainable is a great challenge of the future. Otherwise, radical, extreme populists of the extreme right or the extreme left are going to become to power. And as we have seen in the past, these countries and these regimes become very autocratic, even aggressive, like in the case of Putin and Russia, from a military point of view. So we have to try to defend and reform democratic capitalism. And of course, as we'll discuss, AI is going to lead to lots of economic opportunities, but also a number of risks. So all these trends, in my view, are potentially stagflationary. They reduce economic growth, they increase cost of production, and they're like negative aggregate supply shocks that reduce economic activity and make inflation higher, leading to, again, to other economic and policy consequences. So the trends, unfortunately, are not going in the right direction. I would say that for every problem, there is a solution, and for each one of these challenges, there are solutions, but all of them require, in the short run, costs and sacrifices that have to be done at the individual level, at the community level, national and global level, for the sake of public goods, both national and international, But in a world that is divided by geopolitics, having international cooperation on the key issues of the future is hard. And given that these problems are global public goods problem, whether it is maintaining free trade, economic security, global security, maintaining resolutions of global climate change, of pandemics and other global issues, they require global cooperation. And this global cooperation, of course, in a world of divided global powers becomes more difficult than the past. So there is a path for a better future, but we have to be realistic about it, and we have to try to make sacrifices today for the common good.
Now, normally the leadership is taken by US, and right now it's going through a very polarizing election. Both the candidates and parties have widely different view on spending, taxation, deficit financing. How do you see US political situation and its economy shaping up in post-election scenario?
I would say certainly one of the biggest political, if not geopolitical risk of this year is going to be the result of the US election. First of all, we may not even know on election night who is the winner, whether it's going to be Trump or Harris. It could be challenged. Some people think of even political chaos, even violence potentially, if one side or the other challenges the results of the election. So we may not know who has won. And we saw what happened last time around when assault against the Capitol. There is a risk even of violence in the case of the United States. I would say that depending on who is elected, the economic policies and the foreign policies are going to be, very, very, very different. If Kamala Harris is elected, there'll be more policy continuity in terms of domestic economic policies, foreign economic policies, relation with allies, and overall what has happened in the US so far. In the case of Trump, there is much more risks. There are risks to internal democracy. There are challenges of how to deal with allies and whether he's going to stick with the allies of the United States or not. There are questions about how he's going to be addressing relationship with China. But I would say that the biggest issue is going to be economic policies. He has said that he wants to impose a 10% tariff at least on all goods coming in the United States, even from friends of allies. He wants to impose tariffs up to 60% against China. He wants to make his tax cuts of 2017 permanent. They cost about $5 trillion. It's not clear as how they're going to be paid for. He wants to make the central bank maybe less independent and maybe replace Powell with somebody else. That's going to be also a source of concern and possibly even weaken the value of the dollar, leading to financial instability. If this policy were to be implemented, I would say that certainly inflation will be higher, growth will be lower, and there'll be risk of trade wars between the United States and the rest of the world. Hopefully, he's going to choose economic advisors, if elected, that will be more moderate and realize that this economic policy might lead to a stock market crash, to a bond market crash with much higher yields, and that's going to be the type of market discipline that the US needs. US has a lot of economic strengths, especially in many of the industries of the future, but there's also a very partisan, dysfunctional political system. US society is highly divided, and I think that's the main weakness. And that's leading also to a fiscal situation that is unsustainable. Being the global reserve currency implies that the US can finance itself, both its fiscal and its current account, twin deficits, fast, much for longer and cheaper than otherwise. But that's a risk because it implies that over time, there is no market discipline that forces countries other than the US to do fiscal adjustments that are necessary. So I think that the fiscal situation of the US and the political situations are the biggest risk, but there is a strong dynamism of the private sector. In most of the technology of the future, the US is still ahead of most other countries, and we'll see whether the results of the election leads to economic, political, and social stability or more volatility. It depends very much on how the results of election do occur.
The challenger to US for global dominance is China. And you recently wrote how China is getting into trouble with the middle income trap, with myriad issues like debt, real estate bubble, even policy making. What do you think China will do in terms of policy making? And will they be able to correct the situation?
Well, on one side, I would say that China has been an amazing economic success story. Of course, for over 3 decades, it was growing about 10%. Even before COVID, it was 7%. Right after COVID, it was 5%. I've been a few times recently to China, and even local economists suggest that with unchanged economic policies, the potential growth of China is going to fall towards 3% by the end of this decade. It's very low because China used to grow 10%, while India, as we'll discuss, can grow already now 6-7%, and with reforms more than that. Why growth is going to be so low? One, you have aging of population. The population of China is going to fall by 50% over the next few decades. You have 2 parents and 1 child. When the parents are gone, you have only 1 child, so population is going to collapse. You have an overhang of real estate, both housing and commercial and infrastructures, that used to be 25% of GDP, excessive, now it's gone in a bust. There's a huge amount of leverage in the private and the public sector as well. Private and public debt as a share of GDP is about over 300% in the case of China, is huge, and that overhang is going to be a drag on the economy. Under Xi Jinping, they've moved away from market-oriented reforms towards state capitalism that has become negative for economic growth. They've been bashing many parts of the private sector, and the private sector is in a funk. Private investment now is very, very weak. And the old growth model based on infrastructure, real estate, has run out of steam, and there's not a clear other model. The only other clear model of growth that they have to increase more supply of new goods and services and dump them into global markets. Something's going to be restricted by protectionism in US, in Europe, but also in the global South. There are now technological and trade restrictions against China because of geopolitics. But the key issue about China is that consumption of the share of GDP is very low because the savings of the household sector is very low. And why is low? Because the Chinese have to save for old age, for when they get sick, when they lose their jobs, when they're migrant workers and don't have access to public services, because the share of labor in income is low and the share of capital is high. And therefore, this high saving rate is structural. And unless they create a social safety net so that people can spend more consumption and save less, there'll be a structural lack of demand, and there'll be too much supply, and that supply and excess capacity is going to go in global market now, facing protectionism and other types of restrictions. So the trend, given current policies, is in the wrong direction. It's true that China is doing well in some of the technology of the future, but again, their model is very much top-down, using state-owned enterprises and a subsidy system to have their own national champion, and that model may not be as successful as one that is really bottom-up and driven from the private sector rather than from the public sector. And the existence of the great firewall implies that in information and knowledge economy, you cannot restrict information and be successful in the technology of the future. And certainly the technological restrictions on chips and AI the US is imposing would also slow down the development of China in that direction. So I would say China is facing significant headwinds. The only hope is that at some point they realize that emphasizing security as opposed to economic growth is going to be a self-defeating policy, and they're going to change policy at some point, either with the current president or eventually with a new one. But even the results of the third plenum imply that there is a continuity of the current economic policy rather than real change and reform. And therefore, given the current trends, actually, my view is that by the end of this decade, US growth is going to be above 3% because of technology, while Chinese growth is going to be barely 3%. So the concerns that US had of China taking over the world are totally misguided.
India is transiting from coach of the global growth train to now engine along with China and India. There are policymakers like Mr. Amitabh Kant here and many distinguished entrepreneurs. What advice will be from your side to them so that India doesn't get bogged down in middle income trap?
Well, India, technically speaking, may not yet be formally, a middle income country, even if large parts of the country, of course, are already middle income. Per capita income, I think in India still maybe $2,500, while in China is above 10,000. So the risk of a middle income trap is more significant for China. India still has to get to the middle income and then get to the advanced level. I think the good news about India is that potential growth of India, even with the current policy, is at least 6, maybe 7%. And additional economic reform are going to occur. They're going to lead that potential growth to be 8%. So for the last few decades, China was growing much faster than India. In the next few decades, I think that is going to be just the opposite. Of course, India has to catch up, starting from a much lower level of per capita income. But for that economic success to continue, the kind of economic reforms that have already been done have to be continued and expanded. I'm sure that here everybody knows about them much more than I do, whether it's land reform or labor market reform or bankruptcy reform or more financial inclusion, more investment in skills and human capital, more reform of the bureaucracy and provision of public services. The list is very, very long. I'm quite hopeful that it's going to occur. Of course, the results of your election imply now a coalition government, but I think there is some cohesive views that certain types of reform have to be done regardless of who is in power. Those reforms might be occurring maybe more slowly than they would have occurred if you had a full majority of one party, but the direction is going to be the right one. And even if they're slower, as long as you're going the right direction, they're actually more resilient and more sustainable. One problem of autocracies like China is that you impose things on the people until there is a backlash, one. Two, you make severe policy mistakes, like Xi Jinping has done during COVID, or now we're going towards state capitalism. And therefore, having a vibrant democracy implies that the reforms may occur more slowly, but they're much more sustainable over the long term as well. So I'm quite optimistic that India is going to become a major economic power. It's already going to be, in the next few years, the third largest economy in the world. And with economic power, there'll be also more political and geopolitical power. And certainly, India is going to be one of the great global superpowers in the next few decades as well. But it's important to stick with the kind of economic reforms that are necessary. If there was an excessive slowdown of it, then things are going to go in the wrong direction. I would say also, in a world in which there is more technology, there's a risk of concentration of economic power of oligopolies and monopolies, and therefore maintaining economic competition, making sure that actually there is a vibrant competition is key and important. Of course, you may need to have every country some national champion, but you cannot really pick winners. You might provide subsidies for innovation of various sorts, but making sure that there is enough competition, because the competition leads to startups, to more innovation, rather than having oligopolies or monopolies is going to be also very important. So competition policies are going to be key for achieving that economic success as well.
Dr. Roubini, you have written extensively on artificial intelligence. And if I may add, a bit proactively also, will AI overcome the human stupidity? How should we leverage AI so that it is beneficial to the economies at large?
Well, certainly anything to do with AI is going to radically change the world. I think that actually during the last year or so, there's been too much emphasis only on one aspect of AI, that is Gen AI and LLMs. That's only part of the story. There is so much more to AI. And I think the next revolution is going to be actually in merger between software and hardware, and a massive robotic and automation revolution. You'll have robots that do jobs like human beings that are being invented right now. I think application of AI to biomedical research is going to make us live longer and healthier. That's another one. There'll be a revolution also in energy technologies helped by AI, not just green tech that is also important. I would say fusion might be the great revolution in energy. It's going to allow us to have very cheap energy without any greenhouse gas emissions. There is space exploration. There is quantum computing and its eventual merger with AI. There is all these new manufacturing technologies and the creation of new materials. They're going to create new products of various sorts or another. There is a financial tech revolution as well. It's going to revolutionize financial services enabled by AI. There is green tech, there is ag tech. And unfortunately, of course, in a world of geopolitical power, there'll be weapon systems that are going to be semi-autonomous and others. So I would say there is a dozen of different types of technologies of the future, initiatives of the future, some related directly to AI, some indirectly. They're going to completely change, increase potential growth, increase productivity, increase economic welfare. Those are the positives that are going to occur over the next decade. And I think that the pace of that technological revolution is going to be very, very fast. And a country, by the way, like India, that has already a significant advantage in a variety of information technology, services, and much more is going to be discussed today, can harness the combination of hardware and software. And because of reshoring and friendshoring, a lot of actually manufacturing, high-tech may move also to India and merge with the provision of information services as well. So that's one of the comparative advantages of India over time. So the benefits can be very large, but I would say that AI has a lot of potential, at least potential negative side effects. First one, of course, is misinformation, disinformation, deep fakes, and we already have seen in the past the use of AI to manipulate people's views and even affect the results of the election. The rivals of the US, of Europe, of democracies, they cannot beat these democracies with conventional weapons, are going to use cyber warfare as a way of creating actually division, partisanship within society. That's a real threat. And by the way, cyber warfare is becoming a threat both to governments and to private sector. The number of cyber attacks is escalating, and that's causing significant economic damage. People estimate that cyber warfare and cyber ransomware is already imposing cost of $1 trillion per year around the world. The other issue with AI, I think, is going to be a challenge. It's going to potentially lead to massive, permanent technological unemployment. If you are like here, people that are in the top 10, 20% distribution of skills, education, human capital, of course, AI technology is going to make you more productive over time. But if you are a low value added or even a medium value added worker, white collar, blue collar, over time, your jobs and incomes are going to be challenged. And how you address the question that, especially in societies where there is population growth, you have to give jobs to more people, is going to be a challenge that's be addressed. Of course, you have to provide skills education and making sure that everybody survives and thrives in an AI and technological-driven type of society. There is also a risk, I would say, of a rise in income and wealth inequality because these technologies are capital-intensive, skill bias, and labor-saving. If you own the machines or the capital that owns the machine, you're going to do well. The profit is going to be there. If you're a skilled worker, an advanced one, you're going to be well. But again, as I said, the low value added, their income and jobs are going to be threatened, and a rise in income and wealth inequality is going to lead to a social backlash as well. I would say finally, there's also the risk that we're going to build bigger weapons to fight bigger wars. Before World War I, before World War II, there were massive technological innovation that led to us to bigger weapons to fight bigger wars. And today, with AI, the risk is going to also have a new round of war that is going to be driven by semi-autonomous weapons, robo-soldiers, and eventually stuff that's going to make it much more deadly and dangerous. And therefore, there is a promise of AI, and there are lots of side effects and perils, and how to achieve a proper regulation of AI so that we get the best of it rather than the worst of it is going to be a challenge that every society is going to have to face.
Thank you, Dr. Roubini. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Dr. Roubini covering from global mega threats to US to AI. गागर में सागर भरने की कोशिश की है. I hope you have enjoyed it.
Thank you so much, Professor Roubini, and for sharing your sharp and absolutely realistic perspectives on the economic tides that we face. I think his insights have provided us with a clearer understanding of the global challenges that lie ahead for all of us.
And a very big thank you, Nilesh Shah, for adding such valuable context to the conversation. Let's give them both a huge round of applause. Thank you all so much. And folks, remember, whether you're flying high or just hanging onto a parachute, it's all about the landing. That's the name of my new book. So we hope we've all packed everything well for the journey ahead. Our next speaker, ladies and gentlemen, is someone who has been at the forefront of redefining the way we think about transportation and technology. From co-founding Uber Elevate, which pioneered urban air mobility, to now leading innovation as CCO at Archer Aviation, Nikhil Goyal has consistently pushed the boundaries of what's possible.
Today, he's here to talk about disruptive innovation. A topic he's perfectly placed to speak upon, let me tell you. Whether it's revolutionizing how we move around our cities or developing new technologies that challenge our status quo, Nikhil's work is a testament to the power of bold thinking and relentless innovation. We are really excited to hear his insights on how disruptive ideas can actually transform industries and shape the future.
So please join us in welcoming Nikhil Goyal to the stage.
Excuse me, is there a clicker? Oh, clicker. Good morning, everyone. My name is Nikhil Goyal. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer at Archer Aviation. I'm here today to talk to you about electric air taxis. In fact, this electric air taxi and how we'll use it to help move India. But before I do, I'd like to start by talking about cities. Today, half of the world's population lives in cities. By 2050, 2/3 of the world's population will live in cities. That's 6 billion people living in just 40 megacities across the planet. And while cities are getting more populated, our transportation options are degrading. They're getting more slow, more congested, more expensive, and more damaging to our environment. That burden is particularly profound right here in India, where transportation traffic costs more than 1.47 lakh crore rupees per year. That's over $20 billion annually. But it doesn't have to be this way. When I was at Uber over 10 years ago, we asked ourselves a very simple question. Why have cities, decades ago, started to alleviate residential and commercial congestion on the ground by going to 3 dimensions, but why have we not done the same with transportation and the way we move in and around cities? So we started this exploration with helicopters. We thought to ourselves, why not use helicopters for Mumbai to Pune, a trip that takes hours to be able to do that in just 30 minutes? Why not use helicopters to be able to Uber in largest cities in the world like London, Tokyo, Paris, and New York? And we actually did this in dozens of cities, and of course, everyone loved it, except for the cities themselves. There were major issues when we launched Uber Helicopter. The first was noise. Because of the physics of a helicopter, the rotor on top has to turn so fast that every single time it turns, it creates a sonic boom. And that noise is incredibly disruptive to communities. As such, nearly every city in the world outside of New York and Sao Paulo have banned helicopters. And not only that, but inside of that rotor, there are over 300 what are called single fault parts, meaning if any one of those critical fault parts breaks during flight, the flight would be catastrophic. And in order to maintain those parts and keep them safe, for every 1 hour you fly, you have to do 5 hours of maintenance. And that's tremendously expensive, making the cost to fly a helicopter exorbitant for just about any consumer all over the world. At Archer, we're building Midnight to solve all of those problems. Midnight is an all-electric VTOL, a vertical takeoff and landing aircraft that leverages a technology invented by NASA nearly half a century ago, distributed electric propulsion. Distributed electric propulsion takes what in a helicopter is a large hydrocarbon-powered rotor and turns it into over a dozen propellers powered by electricity. This aircraft behind me that we're building is 100 times quieter than a helicopter when in cruise. And because it has a dozen propellers and a wing, it's fully redundant. It has no single fault parts that I spoke about earlier. Our goal is to produce this aircraft to operate as safe as a commercial airliner from day one. And not only that, it's entirely powered by lithium-ion batteries, which makes it have zero operating emissions and environmentally sustainable for the world. Our aircraft Midnight can carry 5 passengers, so 1 pilot plus 4 passengers. It'll fly at a speed of about 240 kilometers per hour, with a range of about 150 kilometers. That makes trips just like this possible. Many of you here today drove an hour, maybe from Gurgaon, 2 hours, maybe from Noida. With Midnight, you could fly from Gurgaon to here in downtown Delhi in just 7 to 10 minutes. That will change the way every one of us gets to work, goes to see friends, and goes to visit family. And that's our goal. That's what we're building here in India, together with our partner Interglobe. Behind me is a video of our flight. This is back from June, earlier this year. We completed what's called a transition flight. That means we took off just like a helicopter. The propellers at the front of the airplane tilted forward, and then we flew on the wing just like an airplane. This is one of the first times in history that an airplane program has been able to complete such a flight, and we've completed hundreds of these flights over the course of the year as we progress with our technology and progress with our certification pathway with the FAA. We're also manufacturing these planes. At our San Jose headquarters, we're making 6 what are called conforming test aircraft. That means we'll use those aircraft to complete the certification process with the FAA. And then we're building one of the largest aviation facilities in the world in Covington, Georgia. We're doing that with our partner Stellantis. Stellantis is one of the largest automakers in the world. They own brands like Jeep, Ram, Maserati, and a number of others. And together, we're building this factory, which will produce up to 650 aircraft per year. There's virtually no other manufacturing facilities on Earth that are going to be able to produce aircraft at that velocity. And that's because we know that the world needs our aircraft, and we're excited to help start building those at large scale. We listed on the New York Stock Exchange in 2021, and over the lifetime of the company, we've raised nearly $1.5 billion from some of the world's best financial partners, Moelis & Company, Exor, Stellantis, United, BlackRock, and a number of others, and we're proud to be with those investors who really see the opportunity in this space. In the United States, we're targeting the markets of New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and Miami. We pick those markets based off of data that we have internally here at Archer, and we're able to go analyze the most painful routes all across the world where consumers spend millions of hours stuck in traffic. The way we'll launch is by largely leveraging existing aviation infrastructure. Los Angeles, for example, has over 75 helipads all across the city, but virtually none of those helipads are in use today because of the noise that helicopters create when you take off and land. And so we're going to start by activating aviation assets across those cities and doing so with our partners globally, where we have a nearly $6 billion order book from customers all over the world. One of those is United. United Airlines back in 2021 not only invested in Archer, but they placed an order for up to $1.5 billion worth of our Midnight aircraft. And together, we're starting to work at airports such as New York, Houston, Chicago, San Francisco, and others. Since then, United has not only put down pre-delivery payments against those aircraft, they've also invested again into the company multiple times, as recently as last month. We've also partnered with Southwest, one of the leading low-cost carriers in the world. Southwest is California's largest airline, not just in passenger volume, but also in flight volume. And in California, we're envisioning taking trips like Santa Monica to Napa, which today would take you nearly 5 hours. You would have to take a car to LAX airport, take a flight to SFO airport, and then take another 2-hour drive to Napa. With Archer, you'll simply take Midnight to Burbank, you'll take a flight to Oakland or SFO, and then you'll take another Archer on the other end directly to Napa. And with that, we can condense nearly any door-to-door trip in California to under 3 hours. And we've already been hard at work over the last year to go build that vision. But outside of the United States is perhaps where we see the greatest demand. We plan to launch in the UAE across Abu Dhabi and Dubai next year. Earlier this year, we signed a framework agreement with ADIO, the Abu Dhabi Investment Office, with His Excellency Badr Al Alama. And what that enables us to do is invest hundreds of millions of dollars to accelerate our commercial deployment across the country as soon as next year. Our goal is to launch in Abu Dhabi and Dubai by December of next year, and we're well along the way, working hand in hand with partners such as Etihad Airways, Falcon Aviation, Air Chateau, and then our investors, Mubadala. And we've had so much support, not just in the Middle East, but all across Asia as we look at some of the world's most congested cities and where our midnight electric air taxi can make some of the largest difference. And then, of course, here in India, we're incredibly proud to be partnering with Interglobe, with Mr. Rahul Bhatia and Mr. Aditya Pandey. We've been working with Interglobe for more than over the last year, and together we've started to analyze routes across some of India's largest cities, Delhi, Mumbai, Bengaluru, Chennai, Calcutta. And we just continue to see tremendous not only potential, but support from everybody we meet, whether it's with municipal leaders, federal government, and regulators. Just yesterday, we spent time with a leader at the DGCA, and the amount of support and forward thinking that we continue to see here from the Indian government is just incredible. And I am confident that India will be not only one of, but perhaps the largest market for electric air taxis in the world. And we couldn't be more proud to be working with Interglobe, which of course with Indigo is one of the most revered airlines in the world. We envision being able to take Indigo passengers to and from airports and make trips such as Delhi, Noida, and Mumbai, Pune possible in just mere minutes with our midnight aircraft. And with that, I'm very proud and grateful to be here in India today, where we at Archer, together with Interglobe, hope to not just weave into the tapestry of some of the world's largest cities right here in India, but also expand the horizon of what's possible here in this land of endless potential. Thank you everyone for hosting me today, and thank you for being here.
Wow, thank you so much, Nikhil, for that truly inspiring address. I think Nikhil's insights into disruptive innovation have given us all a lot to think about. I think it's clear that staying ahead in today's world demands a willingness to disrupt, to rethink the status quo, and to embrace really bold ideas.
I'm so excited because if Nikhil can get flying taxis off the ground soon, Nikhil, I will be your first customer, and I'm sure getting around Delhi and Bombay or Mumbai could easily use a little airlift. So a big round of applause for Nikhil Goyal, ladies and gentlemen.
How are we all doing? Is the energy in the room good? Yeah, can it be better? Everyone's ready for the next session? I'm sure you're going to enjoy it very much, ladies and gentlemen, because it's time for us to welcome a leader who is at the helm of steering India's foreign policy across the globe. He has been the architect of balancing our diplomatic relations, often with powers that may be in conflict with each other. He's also creating a strategic framework for our national security. It gives me great pleasure today to welcome India's Minister of External Affairs, Dr. S Jaishankar.
Now, before taking charge of the Ministry of External Affairs in May 2019, Dr. Jaishankar had a distinguished career in the Indian Foreign Service. He has served as Foreign Secretary and at various times as Ambassador to the United States, China, and the Czech Republic. A recipient of the Padma Shri, Dr. Jaishankar is also an acclaimed author who continues to shape India's role on the world stage. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Dr. S Jaishankar on stage.
And in conversation, Dr. S Jaishankar, ladies and gentlemen, joining us in conversation with him will be Pranab Dal Samanta, the executive editor of ET Politics. And fittingly, as our country finds itself in an increasingly volatile world, the topic for discussion will be New India, risks, reforms, and responsibilities. Please give them a warm round of applause.
Good morning, Dr. Jaishankar. Always nice to have you with us, and welcome to the first edition of the ET World Leaders Forum. You've been around now from Ukraine to Singapore. Now we have you in Delhi, all in a space of a week or so. My question, how was the train ride?
I could have done with a Vande Bharat. It was about 10 hours each way. And I think given the situation, obviously, you got what you got. 10 hours is 10 hours.
When was the last time an Indian Prime Minister took a train to visit a country? We've heard of, the image of Nehru in a yak is there.
Well, I remember Mr. Modi doing a Shinkansen, a bullet train in Japan. I'm trying to think, I offhand cannot remember any other train ride, at least for a long time.
So that was a crisis point, current crisis point in the global picture as you see it. There are many such crisis points. The world is in turmoil and you've been talking about it. Everybody has been talking about it. How would you paint the picture as an Indian foreign minister?
The global picture?
Yeah.
Well, look, I think if I were to have a one-word summary of this situation, it's probably the first word which you've used for the panel, which is risks. Because what we have seen really for the last 15 years is a steady increase in terms of risks in the to the global order, in the international economy, in individual countries. Now, there are a number of reasons for it. There are different kinds of risks. You would say, okay, as climate change has accelerated, there's a set of risks out there. We saw a once-in-a-century pandemic. That was a risk. That was a super black swan. But there are risks which are coming actually out of the process of change. Because there's global change, and change by nature is disruptive. And, you spoke about Ukraine. That's an example. Not the only one. So if there are today, there's a major war going on in Europe. There's a huge conflict going on in West Asia and the Middle East. There are tensions around Asia. There's a revival of border territorial claims and border frictions. Those are actually, with each one of them, the risks mount. There are risks to supply chains today, not just Houthis in the Red Sea. It could be climate risks. There could be pandemic risks. There are technology risks. The idea that, there are borders and borders are some kind of hard line and problems can be stopped on that side of the border, I think those days are over. So look at it any which way. To me, every government, consciously or otherwise, is today assessing risks, and the majority of policies are on de-risking. That sounds a bit defensive. There's other aspects. The ones who do it better have the ability then to explore opportunities, but the focus of the world is in de-risking.
Part of the core decision making of this government, what is our strategy? Is it a mitigation strategy? Is it a leveraging strategy? Or is it just a managing strategy?
In a kind of way, it's an all of the above. But if you manage it well, if you de-risk it well, then you have many other options. I just kind of turn you back to the COVID era, okay? There were countries, everybody came out of the COVID badly. Those who came out less badly came out well. Now, I think we were among the countries who, largely because we followed our own, our own understanding of our own society and didn't listen too much to free advice which we were getting in large quantities, we actually took a number of steps during that period, which allowed us to come out much better out of COVID than the rest of the world. In a way, you could say that, I mean, to me, one big lesson out of COVID was health security, food security, manufacturing security. Okay. Now, a lot of our policies today, when you say make in India, it's part of de-risking. When you say that, look, we will produce our own vaccines, and at that time many people questioned it. That's also part of de-risking. When we sometimes intervene to ensure that our food markets are stable, that too is part of de-risking. Now, if you've done a good job in de-risking, then you can actually have the luxury to explore other opportunities. So we are, because I think we have done decently out there, we are today, let us say, exploring opportunities, trying to get involved more in global supply chains, looking at, say, domains like semiconductors, where historically, which we have neglected, we are now sort of wading into it very, very seriously. Looking at really the sunrise sectors, looking at EVs, looking at renewables, looking at drones, looking at space, looking at AI. All those you can do if you've done that basic de-risking. If we had not succeeded so well, I think we wouldn't have the bandwidth or the attention span to actually look at other areas.
Here there's another view that had the pandemic not happened and we had taken a growth trajectory, minus the pandemic, we've not reached that growth trajectory yet. This year's economic survey also points out to FDI flows dropping, and that's been an issue. There is this whole view that we should relook at our China approach, maybe allow some of the FDI to come in, remove those barriers, not be so stringent with visas, and look at maybe some of the low middle-end supply chain opportunities which are coming from there. Your views, sir, because you have the security picture at hand as well.
No, look, to say what would I have done had the pandemic not happened, to me is a waste of time. The pandemic happened. So why speculate about what could have happened? So now that it has happened, and everybody is looking at a post-pandemic recovery, and not just a post-pandemic recovery, there are many other factors. I mean, the global environment has changed. I mean, the very sharp competition between the United States and China today is the dominant feature of the global environment. It has consequences for the international economy. It has deep consequences for the technology world. So these are real factors. Now, you can't build policies around, I wish that had not happened and I would like to go that way. So I take what has happened as a given. Now, in that given, your question on China. Look, China in many ways is a unique problem because it is a unique polity, it is a unique economy. And unless one tries to grasp that uniqueness and understand it, I think the judgments, the conclusions, and possibly the policy prescriptions flowing out of it can be problematic. It's not just an Indian problem.
Are you referring to the economic survey?
No. I'm referring to the world's response to China. If today people are complaining about trade deficits with China, and we are too, why is that? Because decades ago, I mean, we all consciously chose to overlook the nature of Chinese production and the advantages which they enjoyed in a system where they got a level playing field with all the advantages that they brought to bear. So my point is there is a general China problem. I mean, do remember, Pranab, we are not the only country in the world which is having a debate about China. Go to Europe and ask them, what is today among your major economic or national security debates? It's about China. Look at the United States. It's obsessed with China, and rightly so in many ways. So the fact is, let's not make out as though it's only India which has a China problem. India has a China problem, a special China problem. That's over and above the world's general China problem. So my point is, when you look at this, when we approach the issue of China as a whole, Chinese trade with China, investment from China, exchanges of various kinds with China, we have to, if you neglect to take into account that this is a very unique country with a very different way of working, I think your basics start to go off track. So once you understand that, because there is a general problem with China as well as our own situation, I mean, all of you know we have a very difficult situation in the border for the last 4 years. I think the sensible response to it is to take the precautions which a country like India should be taking. Now, it has never been the government's position that we should not be having investments from China or doing business with China. It is that investment, because we are largely talking investments here. When it comes, trade is a different matter. I mean, I'm happy to talk about why we should be manufacturing more. But on the investments issue, I think, to me, it's common sense that investments from China would be scrutinized. I think the border and the state of relations between India and China call for it. But I think even if countries who do not have a border with China are scrutinizing investments from China. I mean, Europe doesn't have a border, America doesn't have a border, but yet they're doing that. So the fact is, the issue is not do you have investment from China or not. It's not a yes or no answer. It is what should be the appropriate level of scrutiny, how should you handle it. And when you look at that, sometimes, when I read stuff, including in your newspaper, where people say, we should clearly identify this is national security. It doesn't work that way anymore. Because what is national security itself has expanded. I mean, tell me, if we were completely reliant, let us say, on pharmaceuticals from China, does it not have national security implications? If your telecom is, based on Chinese technology, can you be impervious to it? So it's not like, there is a clear identification of this is a yes and that is a no. It's a much more complex factor. And in my view, at a certain level with certain countries in certain situations, the line between economics and security is a very thin line. So I wouldn't, sharpen this and make it a kind of a yes or no, we should be allowing them open door or we should close the door. It's nobody's case that either of those two options should be there.
So I'll put it a more direct question. There has been a lot of talk about taking a relook at Press Note 3. Do you think Press Note 3 is serving us well? Is it lived its time, needs a relook? Or what's your assessment?
No, I think I answered that question. The question is, in my view, should investments, a country like India, in a competitive age where where technologies can be leveraged, investments can be leveraged, market shares can be leveraged, I think a country like India, and this is not necessarily an answer limited to China, I think a country like India must look at the investments that are coming in. Not necessarily negatively, but you must scrutinize it. You must have some sense of what is coming in which sector. You cannot be hands-off and say, well, the market will take care of it, or this will be great because there will be more production. There should be. I mean, I'm pro-investment. I'm pro-growth. But I do think somewhere there should be a balance.
Some feel that the US narrow yard, high fences has worked better. How differentiated are we? Or are we somewhere in the similar?
No, look, the US is the US. I would not extrapolate their situation, because the US and China are engaged in a different competition. it is a competition for, in a sense, you can say, for global primacy or global leads. And it has many, many dimensions to it. Our situation is very different. Our situation today is, for years, I've actually, in the name of globalization, allowed, foreign players advantages in my home economy to the detriment of my domestic players. That is the reality. And I think that is something which we need to address. I mean, I genuinely believe that, at the end of the day, we cannot just say these are our bottom lines, this is most, L1 is from China, or, these are the most competitive. All that works, I understand that. I mean, I've had a brief exposure to business myself. But I think there is a larger, even business has a social obligation. And there is an obligation to Indian workers. There is an obligation to our small businesses. We cannot be hollowed out in the name of efficiency and globalization. I think that's a very, very dangerous thing to advocate.
I'll move you on a little bit to the wider neighborhood, our closer neighborhood. We all are aware of the multiple crisis point. We know what has happened in Bangladesh. You had a very good statement this morning in the newspapers on Pakistan. Here's my ask to you. Something which has not been talked about much. For the last decade, and you've been involved at various levels, you've used economic levers with the neighborhood. Has that given you better options as you deal with these crises now? And how integrated have you actually been able, because we hear these stories about the power grid, about connectivity. How is it really working in terms of policy options? Has there been a real change? Be honest about that.
Let me come back to de-risking. Okay? What happens when you have multiple neighbors? And, by definition, relationships with neighbors are very complicated. They're all democratic polities. Governments will change. There will be political debates in their country. Often we will be the center of those debates. It's natural. We are a big country. So we have to expect and plan for and build into our policy making an expectation that there will be changes, some more organic, some more disruptive in our neighborhood. How do you then how do you stabilize? Because I'm now de-risking the neighborhood. Okay. You do that by creating the factors of stability. If two countries are linked by, let us say, a power grid, actually you have secured both ends. One is a producer, one is a customer, both have an interest in keeping it going. If you have a fuel pipeline, the same logic applies. If you have more trade, if you have more tourism, let's say, take Bangladesh. There's a lot of medical tourism which happens out of Bangladesh. Okay, the patients benefit there, the industry benefits here. So the whole point is, for the last 10 years, when we've been talking about neighborhood first, the entire exercise is about making sure that there are so many connections in so many domains which are so indispensable, which are so deep, which are so central to everybody's calculation, that the factors of volatility get relatively diminished. So whatever happens finally, people will say, okay, we may have those differences, but there's that reality out there. And I think that's good for us.
Are you seeing that change happening in Bangladesh with the interim administration? People are talking about extradition requests to receive.
No, look, you are in the newspaper business. For you, it's a 24-hour cycle. I'm in the diplomacy business. For me, I'm prepared to wait at least a few months for anything to fructify. So, I think I would not be in a hurry to call out situations. And look, I'm not saying that to be evasive or diplomatic. I urge you to look, for example, at our relationship with Maldives last year. a year ago, people were predicting all kinds of things about our relationship. The fact is, the factors of stability at the end of the day kicked in. Look, let me tell you one thing. Our neighbors eventually do know when COVID happened, they got their vaccines because of us. When Ukraine conflict happened, many of them got their fertilizers and their food grains because of us. When, difficult situations happen, ask Sri Lanka. Had Sri Lanka waited for the IMF to deliver, God only knows what would have happened. The fact is, we stepped in much faster, much less conditional, and in much larger volumes. So, at the end of the day, the neighborhood today knows the realities. And I think it's important, look, if we invest in the neighborhood and the neighborhood invests in us, I guarantee you this would be a far more stable, predictable, resilient region. Because I expect this is going to be a very choppy decade. We're going to, because we have two big problems, don't think that's the end of it. We're still in the first half of the decade. So if you are going to prepare for a very choppy existence, everybody is looking for ways of securing themselves. And these are ways of doing so. So I think they value it as well.
I'm moving now a little beyond risks into opportunities, into how well are we sort of looking at leveraging these risks. As a country, what kind of reforms would this government look at, whether it is the domestic front or in any other way, to revive trade, become the natural alternative of stability in the world? There's a great opportunity through all of this. Do you think as a government you've done enough? More needs to be done domestically?
No, Pranab, you can never do enough. Okay. But if you ask me, have we done substantially, progressed in terms of preparing for the opportunities? I would say yes, but I would say again, it would be a caveated yes, because I would say there's much more that awaits us. If you just look at the last few days, okay, you've had this announcement of 12 industrial clusters across the country. You've had an announcement of many more roads and railway lines. Okay. You've had announcements of major deep water ports in this country. So the fact is, if one were to clinically, and this is not a politically colored analysis, if one were to think back about where have there been shortcomings on our part nationally, I think our infrastructure development was way, way behind what it should be. Our focus on manufacturing was not what it should be. Our support for agriculture was not what it should be. I think each one of these is being rectified. Now, you can't cold start something. You can't come in on 2014 and say, I want to change everything and I'll take it from second gear to fifth gear at one go. It's going to be, there's going to be a kind of build-up. And my sense is, as we hit the third term, a lot of the homework, the preparation, the experience, the relationships, the confidence which we have built up will all kick in. And, when you say, I agree with you. On the, one of the problems with de-risking is it sounds defensive and it can make you defensive. A country like India should not be defensive. I think we should today be looking at global opportunities. And I see today that the reworking of supply chains as a major global opportunity. I see new businesses. We have to leapfrog. That today, even on semiconductors, for example, there's a debate in this country. Should we be investing in this sector or not? The fact is, if you say, well, that investment is very big because I still have those problems to attend, that means you will always be behind the curve. You will be 25 years behind the world because you're still looking at 25-year-old problems to solve. So you have to figure out how to fix the legacy issues while also thinking ambitiously about the future. So, to me, whether it's the industrial clusters, whether it is the semiconductor push we are making, whether it is our desire to attract more, creating a more enabling environment for manufacturing, they come as a package.
But let me ask you a slightly political question. Has the outcome of the recent election slowed down the process for you, or has it delivered a message to actually hasten it? How are you guys seeing it in the government?
If you look between early June and we are now end August, just think back at all the decisions that have happened in these 3 months. I think you have the answer.
So the pace has quickened, you say?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
So this is Vande Bharat plus plus.
Yes, yes, indeed.
Okay. Moving on from here, the other theme in this panel is the responsibility. And you've also been speaking about it at various places, that India should do more. I think one of going to Russia, going to Ukraine, even when the crisis in West Asia, you were in Iran, that's on the risk side. Is there more we look at, you working on new scripts with the Quad, etc. Without, taking a broad brush at all of this, what kind of role are you telling the world India can play?
First of all, I think there are two kind of preparatory points here. One, should we be doing more? Because I don't think there is a deep awareness in this country or a deep consensus in this country that we should be doing more. I think there are obviously people who believe that. There are people who are more skeptical. Sometimes they attribute political coloring to what we do. So here's a very, very simple point. Today we are the 5th largest economy. Let's say end of the decade, maybe we'd be 3rd. You cannot have the same contribution to global welfare as number 3 in the world, which you had when you were number 11 or 12 in the world. It's a very simple proposition. Our stakes in the world are higher. Our capabilities are greater. The expectations of the world are different. And our interests are there. Now, often they merge. It's not either or. If you look today at the Middle East, we sent a lot of ships to the Arabian Sea when those attacks were happening. In fact, at one point, I think after the United States, we were probably the biggest deployment out there. Now, I put it to you, look, our trade was at stake, but the region's trade was at stake as well. And somebody had to step forward and help with the stabilization. So the idea that, there are bigger powers out there on, the problem's going to be taken care of and I don't need to worry about it, I think that era is over. One part of it is we've become bigger. The other is others, those on whom the world historically relied on, particularly the United States, I think they are also much more stretched today. So we have to be realistic about what, let us say, we could expect from others in such a situation. I often compare it, to the tsunami. In 2004, when we had the tsunami in the Indian Ocean, a very large part of the response actually came from outside the Indian Ocean. It was led by the US, but you had Europe and you had Japan, you had Australia. We were there very prominently. Today, God forbid, something like that happens. I think the responses will largely be out of the region itself, because I'm not sure the others have the capability and the inclination to do what they did 20, 30 years ago. So I do think, as part when we speak about, let us say, the rise of India, we must have a parallel conversation. We must grow our capabilities, but side by side, if we are getting so much out of the world, we must also have a conversation side by side. What are we doing for the world and with the world?
I think we all are running out of time, but just this thing about how are you de-risking yourself from the US presidential elections?
No, I have no risks.
Do business with anyone. And absolutely the last question. What did Zelensky tell you?
What, sorry?
What did Zelensky tell you?
About what?
How, did he tell you anything as to whether he can talk with Putin, not talk with Putin? Is there a possibility?
No, look, what Zelensky told us stays between Zelensky and us.
On that note, thank you, Dr. Jaishankar. Always a pleasure having you over. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Jaishankar, for those insightful perspectives on India's global strategy and diplomacy. Your leadership continues to elevate India's position on the world stage.
But Cyrus, I would have loved to hear his answer about Zelensky. Yeah, but no, we won't tell. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have, at the end of this session, gained a much deeper understanding of the complexities of shaping our foreign policy. A very special thanks to Pranab Dal Samanta for guiding this really enriching conversation. Thank you all for attending. Now next, we're really excited to welcome a leader who is at the forefront of leveraging AI to drive transformation across Asia. Ladies and gentlemen, Ahmed Mazari, President of Microsoft Asia. With a remarkable career that includes leadership roles at GE and Genpact, Ahmed currently oversees a dynamic region of 20 countries, guiding a team of 30,000 employees and 100,000 partners. His focus is on accelerating digital transformation, fostering AI-driven innovation, and building trusted partnerships throughout the region.
And today he will share his insights on powering India's transformation, the AI opportunity, discussing how artificial intelligence can revolutionize various sectors and drive growth across our country. Please join us in welcoming Ahmed Mazari to the stage. Sir, it's wonderful to have you here.
Welcome.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Good morning. Namaste. Such a pleasure to be back home. Thank you for having me here. Thank you for the sponsors for setting up a wonderful event. I want to first start by where the host started early in the morning. And there was a quote from Mahatma Gandhi which said, "What you do today is what the future will be tomorrow." I have this unique privilege of being part of a company that has a pretty significant presence in India. As a matter of fact, the second largest base of employees for Microsoft across the world is in India. And I'm humbled to share some stories, some ideas, and probably a few provocative suggestions on what India can do and how we believe India would be at the forefront of AI. We're humbled by the early advances of AI, its ability to get into every aspect of industry, community, societies that we live in. And this is what makes my job and our job challenging and interesting all at the same time. But perhaps there is a moment to step back and look at the last millennia. This is a fascinating slide. And as we look, and I promise you we won't spend the time in the 1,000 years, but as you look at this slide, GDP growth was in line with population growth. And that went on till about the last 300 years. The last 300 years are perhaps the most consequential for us, and today is perhaps even more consequential with AI. With the steam engine, electricity, manufacturing, automation, the internet, mobile phone, cloud computing, we are seeing significant acceleration of technology. And that's what provides the opportunity for us in the future. I'm energized by how India has therefore the potential to scale up and leapfrog some of what we heard this morning. But this technology that's in our hands is different. If we look at this chart shows the acceleration. Can I get the chart back, please? Sorry. This chart is very interesting. It's not about comparing technologies. This chart is about the possibilities of the future and the possibilities that we today are perhaps limited by our own imagination. And it's probably appropriate that I share some wonderful examples of what AI is doing in this wonderful and vibrant country. A large population still is in agriculture. Their livelihoods are dependent on weather patterns, on soil composition, on crop yield, and what they make of the crop yield. We are working exclusively with some of these farming communities to drive at the core the opportunity to transform. We're seeing new opportunities for crop management. There's a very exciting project we're doing in Baramati on AI, and using AI to drive farm productivity and ensuring that farmers get much better yield. But equally, as we pivot to other industries, the Siksha co-pilot, I met this lady in Bangalore who's a teacher who said that she is now unlocking about 2 hours every day because she can use AI for her lessons plans and teaching students. The Bhashini initiative, which is done on Azure, is an initiative of ensuring we create inclusion through languages. And Jugalbandi, which was an app that actually got created within 100 days of GPT being launched in India. Congratulations, India, for that. To enable a rural farmer to access subsidies. These are various examples that point to the core opportunity of what AI can do and how AI can empower India at scale. India is not about New Delhi. India is not about Bangalore. But India is about that citizen in every village, in every corner of our country, to ensure that they have an opportunity to achieve more. As we play this video, it gives me goosebumps because I had the opportunity to meet this woman. Can we raise the volume, please? I'm sorry about the audio. I might voice over a little bit, perhaps. This is why we think AI needs human augmentation. And I'm here right in front of you doing human augmentation. This is another fascinating example of inclusion and empowerment. The young lad we saw there runs a startup. His story is equally powerful, left for another day. But what he is doing is that he is creating empowerment and employment. The lady that you saw, this lady here, is from Nasik actually a village outside Nasik, and she is earning 5 times the wage that she earned earlier. What is she doing? She's recording content in Marathi. Now, 2 things. She doesn't have to move. She earns 5 times more. And she's in her safe space. She speaks in Marathi, the language she was born. Now, why is that important? We may not be familiar, but while this technology has created access and acceleration both, today, 88% of global languages do not have access to language models. That is 1.2 billion people across the world, and perhaps a large portion of that in India. So the tokens created by this woman in a village outside Nasik is helping create the language model in Marathi and several other examples of that. This is what creates the energy, and this is what creates the excitement for us. But the real opportunity ahead of this also remains in the world that I grew up in. I was fortunate. I left university in the early 90s in India and had the opportunity of seeing India become the knowledge capital of the world. India became synonymous with creating patents, IP, acceleration, and those names that you see here are just a handful of many names that powered India to be the knowledge services capital of the world. And we feel confident that India will power the AI innovation of the world, because we have the skill base, the expertise, and the desire to innovate at scale. And Microsoft is committed to that acceleration. This quote probably sums it so well, because AI is not about the companies only. AI is about individuals. It's about the ability to create acceleration with every human citizen. I was disappointed you couldn't hear that lady, but there was so much joy in what she was doing and the excitement of being inclusion. She talks about the fact that she can now use a financial app in Marathi. She talks about the joy of making a decision about where to put money. And this is where we here have the opportunity. I encourage business leaders here to think about it. But as you think about what can happen in India, I want to quote a BCG study. 2/3 of global leaders believe in the power of AI now. But as they turn back, they realize that we are slightly deficient on skills. And we as Microsoft have a very critical role to play. We have launched several skilling initiatives around the world, across Asia. For the geography that I have responsibility for, we're empowering 10 million people. But in India, Advantage India will skill 2.5 million people on AI. We're also looking at skilling on AI co-pilots. The Siksha co-pilot is a terrific example of creating capacity in the education system. And we are also bridging the tech divide. We have already skilled women, and by the end of 2024, we're adding 75,000 more women into technology and AI. And this skill will be critical if India has to have inclusive growth for the next few decades. As we look at the opportunity ahead, I have to point to something that we looked at. We said to ourselves, what is India? India is a land of opportunity. of innovation, of skill, and of breaking barriers. And as India marked Independence Day just 2 weeks ago, Viksit Bharat, we went and asked Copilot, can you do a picture of India? And while this picture may have many dimensions, the pride and joy that all of you must have in this room is that AI is creating access without barriers. AI is creating access to help create skills. AI is helping create business and business models that do not exist today. AI is creating jobs and jobs that do not exist today. As I look at the future, there's hope, there's joy, and there's ambition. I'd like to leave this room thinking about technology and hope and AI as hope, technology as an opportunity in everything we do. And as India makes impressive strides in digital AI, in digital infrastructure, India now has the potential to be unchallenged because India has the talent, the skill, and the ambition to achieve more. Thank you.
India has 22 official languages, and Marathi is actually a language that is spoken by millions and millions of people. But unfortunately, many Indian languages are under-resourced.
We cannot let language be the thing that does not allow you to use technology.
AI is a transformative technology. People deserve to have access to these amazing technologies in their language. Karya exists to accelerate social mobility in rural India by building AI-based solutions to help our communities. Our workers record sentences in their mother tongue on their smartphones. And for the simple task, we pay them nearly 20 times the Indian minimum wage. And that leads to a data set, so they keep on making royalties every single time those data sets are resold.
I think it is imperative that if we are changing someone's income structure in this way, that we also need to help them understand financial literacy.
आज सगळ्यांना आपल्याला आर्थिक साक्षरता शिकण्यासाठी मिळते आहे आणि आपण हे कार्या ॲप मधून करणार आहोत.
रमेश आणि कल्पेश हे दोघेही रोजंदारीचे बांधकाम मजूर होते.
मी कधी ऐकलं नव्हतं, मी माझा आवाज कधीच ऐकलं नव्हता की त्या कार्याकडनं मला त्या ॲप मुळे माझा आवाज कसा आहे हे मला माहित पडलं आणि त्याच्यामधून शिकायला पण भेटलं. बँकिंगचं याचं कर्ज कसं घ्यायचं, ती कशी बचत करायची, मुलांच्या नावावर एफडी कशा करायच्या, हे खूप खूप शिकलो. आम्हाला आता कुणाची गरज नाही की एटीएम मध्ये जायचंय आणि पैसे त्यांनी काढून आणून द्यावेत, असं नाही, आम्ही स्वतः करू शकतो.
Karya's platform is hosted on Azure. We use Azure Cognitive Services for our own AI-based validation work. And we're also using Azure OpenAI.
मला खूप आनंद वाटतो, मला खरंच गर्व वाटतो की माझा आवाज कुठेतरी कोणतरी ऐकणार आहे आणि मी मराठीत बोलले त्याच्यामुळे कोणीतरी शिकणार आहे. मला अभिमान वाटतो.
If you can solve it for India, you can solve it for the world.
Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Eman Mazari with that absolutely riveting address. Thank you so much for that address. We can do better than that. Can we hear some noise in this room? Thank you so much. I personally learned so much from this particular insight that he showed us. The potential of AI to transform India's future and, of course, drive significant advancements. It's anyone's guess.
Absolutely. And Mr. Mazari, I have to say, your talk truly did hit home. I truly believe in the transformative power of AI. Quite frankly, I think this entire script was also written by AI. So we're starting there. Let's give him a huge round of applause, ladies and gentlemen.
We can do better.
Mr. Eman Mazari, thank you. And with that, next we turn our focus to a topic that's critical for India's future: sustainable capital. In a world increasingly driven by the need for responsible and long-term investments, understanding why sustainable capital is essential for India is more important than ever.
Absolutely. And to guide us through this, we are absolutely honored to have with us Marc-Andre Blanchard. As the head of CDPQ International, Marc-Andre oversees CDPQ's international operations and leads their sustainability initiatives, integrating ESG factors into all investment activities. With a distinguished background that includes serving as Canada's ambassador to the United Nations and being a key figure in Canada's NAFTA Council, he brings us a wealth of experience. Please join me in welcoming Marc-Andre Blanchard to the stage.
So, thank you very much for this very warm welcome, and I'm very excited to be here, to be in Delhi at this time. And well, it's a tough act to follow after Dr. Jaishankar, and after talking about AI. You know, you got a boring guy talking about pension fund. But I'll do my best. This topic about sustainability is a topic that is very close to my heart. I just want to say, let me just say a few words about sustainability before, about CDPQ before I talk about sustainability. CDPQ, it's an institutional investors from Quebec, the province of Quebec in Canada, where we have $450 billion of assets under management. We're one of the largest investors in the world in renewables, one of the largest investors in the world in infrastructure. We have 12% of our assets in this region. We have $9 billion in assets in India. We've been here since 2016. We are very bullish on India. We want to grow here. And this is one of the reasons why I'm here, but also one of the reasons why this year we're very proud to have recruited N. Venkatram, who is the former CEO of Deloitte, who now is our country chair. So Venkat, I saw you somewhere. So Venkat, if you're in the room, just say hello. And yes, he is. Thank you, and we're happy to, we're very proud of that, and to be here for the long term. You have to know that it's part of our DNA to actually invest with a purpose. In 2017, we were the first institutional investors to come out with actually a plan of action. We had a climate strategy, and fast forward a few years later, 8 years later, we now have nearly 80% of our assets under management in low carbon assets, or assets in low intensity sectors, where our constructive capital make a difference. So yes, we focus on the carbon footprint, but we also focus on how we can help our portfolio companies and help others lowering their carbon footprint. And let me be very clear. We see the transition as an opportunity, as creating value, and actually this is how it's about risk management, but it's more about the opportunities and the creation of value. We really believe that, so it's enough about us. I'll talk to you about just sustainability and sustainable finance and why it's so key and it's important and what we need to be doing just rapidly. We have the chance of leaving our planet in a more sustainable way than we found it, actually. People don't believe in this, but it is true. But we need, a lot of what we have done to progress so much as societies has had a huge impact on the environment. Now we need to address that impact, and there are ways to address it. But it's going to take a realignment of capital like we've never seen before. And this is the big thing, because a lot of what needs to be done actually doesn't meet the usual risk-return equation that we see in investment. And this is why we need to look at it differently and look at and act differently. And this is how we actually see this whole thing. This is why we spend so much time about how are we going to work all together to do this realignment of capital. On the global stage, you have people who believe that there's a huge debate about sustainable investment. There's you've heard about wokeism and all of that. Some argue that profits or good returns do not go hand in hand with sustainability. At CDPQ, we don't believe that. Just think about two companies. One company, they both have exactly the same financial. Company A has less of a carbon footprint, actually uses less water, less energy, has a more diverse workforce and leadership. Which company between A and B that has the most value? The market has spoken so many times, it's company A. This is why we're talking about, when we talk about, whether it's ESG or looking at sustainability, we believe we're talking about good management and value creation. On the other end of the spectrum of the debate, there are those who believe that the world is doomed. Well, I've spoken to Dr. Roubini. He told me that the word was not coined by him, so I could use it. But, seriously, too many of our young people, whether it's in Canada or in India or other places in the world, believe that humanity is doomed or the future is frightening. And I actually believe that we have a collective responsibility to show progress. Last year, when you look at it, last year we had a clean energy boom with 50% more renewables capacity added to energy systems around the world. And then, if you want, on my way here, it was interesting on the plane, my sons had bought me this book, Not the End of the World. It's written by Anna Ritchie. It's a phenomenal book. I invite you, I don't know her at all. It's my children who bought it to me. But it's actually, for those of you who believe that actually it's all about negativism and that we've not made progress and we can't make progress, actually, it's very good. And for those of you who are optimistic like me, it comforts you that you're just not living in La La Land. And what she says, I think, is right. She says, denying progress robs us of the inspiration that change is possible. And that's a big thing, actually, that we need to do in all of our societies, and particularly for our young people. When you think about it, the carbon footprint of my sons is half that of their grandparents. This is huge progress we've made. In the last 10 to 15 years, the price of solar went down 90%. The price of wind energy went down 70%. Of course, we need to do way more. We need to get energy storage right. We need to get carbon capture right. We need to get e-mobility right. We need to get agriculture, the blue economy, all of these things. The list is endless. But just think about in terms of opportunities and how we can, the opportunities that are there for us in the business sector. Because let's just say one thing. This cannot be done by government acting alone. And this cannot be done by the private sector acting alone. It needs to be done by all of the actors and all of the stakeholders coming together to actually do this better alignment of capital. And just think about us, the institutional investors. There are risks that we cannot take. And, if you add to that complexity, the current fiscal situation of many countries, the complexity of geopolitics, the unknown of AIs, as we've seen, this is why finance talk more and more about blended finance around the world. This is why your government last year, when it led the G20 so successfully, it put blended finance at the top of the agenda, because we need to define, we need to build instruments that will allow us to get the risk-return equation right for all stacks of capital that needs to get involved in all of this. And of course, it makes things more complicated. And of course, there's no direct or straight line to net zero. We'll make mistakes. There will be greenwashing. There will be things that actually will not work. But we ought to actually go and look at the destination and do everything we can actually to get there. But we need to act fast, and we need to act at scale. And that blended finance thing can be all sorts of things. And I'll finish on that. Blended finance, well, you look at it in the US, the RRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, that's blended finance. It's a massive carrot, massive one. And guess what? Investors react positively to incentives and to carrots. It is working very well. So well that actually the money is more deployed in some Republican states than in Democratic states, because they look at it as from an opportunity point of view, and it's a massive realignment of capital. And of course, not every country can afford what the United States did for e-mobility and renewables. But when you actually look at it, it's going to lower the cost of a lot of technology for all of us around the world. And so what we need to be doing is come together like we've never been together. Governments, philanthropy, family offices who can take a different kind of risk that I can take as an institutional investor, where I have 6 million people expecting me to actually deliver a pension when they retire. We need to actually get the technology people around the table like never before. We actually need instruments from multilateral development banks and from development banks of local countries to actually develop some instruments that will allow institutional investors and other people to come together to make the investments needed in all of this. And it's not easy. It's not easy at the time where there's a lot of cynicism, there's a lot of populism, and a lot of, you know, the confidence and the trust in the institution is not there as much as some as we would need, particularly in some countries like in the West. So what we need to do is actually look at risk differently. There's a risk of not doing anything. We also need to take the time to look at opportunities differently. When we don't know a market, we tend to underestimate the opportunities and overestimate the risk. That needs to change. But for that to change, we need to build trust with all of the stakeholders. And this is why such meeting like this is very good. We need to get to know each other. We need to work together. We need to create partnerships that 5 years ago were unthinkable. We need to, like in Montreal, as a pension fund, I'll finish on that. We have built a partnership, and the trains have been built here in India for a light rail train that was needed. 67 kilometers of light rail train around Montreal. Who would have thought that a pension fund would be actually the developer, the owner, the operator of 67 kilometers of light rail train? Well, we did it because we put together all of the stakeholders, the provincial government, the federal government, the technology people, the energy supplier, all of the municipalities that we go through to actually create this unique light rail train that is actually key for our own transition in Canada. This is the kind of thinking that needs to go on in the world. In India, you're so innovative, you're so entrepreneurial. We actually are here to be partnering with you, and we look forward to the discussion. I thank you for listening, and don't forget, we'll receive no money for that book, but if you want to feel actually good about the future, I invite you to read this. Thank you very much. Enjoy.
Thank you so much, Marc-Andre, for that riveting address. And you were talking about, and I completely agree about your point on profit and sustainability. Personally, as a host, I mean, profits has been a bit of a problem, but I assure you I'm 50% there, I'm 100% biodegradable. So we're starting, it's a start. Your perspective on sustainable capital has truly broadened our understanding of how India can forge a resilient and inclusive future.
I couldn't agree more, Cyrus. Marc-Andre's expertise and foresight really actually emphasize just how pivotal sustainable investments are in shaping India's growth. And I think they are the Karan Arjun of profit, and sustainability are the Karan Arjun of this business. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's give what we just forgot to do. Give Marc-Andre a big round of applause for his thought-provoking insights today. He was awesome.
Lots of questions. The most important one, what's next? Our next session dives into the heart of innovation, startups, They are the real catalyst of change and driving new ideas and disrupting industries at a pace that often outstrips traditional models. Today's discussion, titled Catalysts of Change, Crafting the Future Through Startups, will explore how these dynamic ventures are crafting the future and shaping the world around us.
And so we have a fantastic lineup of leaders who are at the forefront of this change. Maria Caceres, co-founder and CEO of Built.in, who is connecting and empowering the tech community to proliferate the spirit of innovation. Please welcome her on stage. Keshav Reddy, founder and CEO of Equal, who's pushing the boundaries of what's possible in the world of sustainable technology and social impact. And of course, Nikhil Goyal, the CCO of Archer Aviation and co-founder of Uber Elevate, who's revolutionizing urban mobility. Please welcome them on stage.
And moderating this insightful and incredible conversation is Archana Rai, editor South, The Economic Times, who will engage us through the strategies and visions that are powering these startups. Let's welcome our panelists with a loud, huge round of applause.
Enjoy this session, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you. You know, we are at a moment in time in business history for India where startups are finding validation on public markets, which has never happened before, so much so that I think they are now seen as more valuable by public market investors than even the private investors who've backed Indian startups for a very long time. So I think this is a great time to be having this conversation. And to begin, I thought we should sort of lay out the, sort of the very interesting panelists that we have. So we have Keshav here, who is an entrepreneur who's working on the digital public infrastructure that India has built, which is really one of the most innovative technologies that have come out in the country. Maria, who I think, by her own words, is building a LinkedIn for technology jobs. Is that how you would describe it? And she's in India to see what she can do more for tech workers. And Nikhil, you'll know, he's, I think, sort of really dazzled all of us in India with the possibility of getting from point A to point B in quick time, which is a really big ask for those of us in India. So I thought we could begin by describing, getting our panelists to talk about how India has done very well with building digital infrastructure, but has, as we all know, has struggled with building physical infrastructure. So what can startups actually do to change this? So maybe we could just begin really with Nikhil trying to tell us, is there a way out, So particularly because I come from a city where the contrast is more acute. Bangalore is the home for India's DPI, but is one of the cities where the commute is the slowest. So can startup innovation change physical infrastructure for India?
I certainly think so. I mean, look, India has an incredible history, if you look empirically, of leapfrogging into new technologies. If you think about the telecom infrastructure here in India, for example, I grew up in the United States, born and raised, and I grew up with, dial-up internet, and then fiber internet, and then satellite internet, and then ultimately now I use, of course, my phone for most of my telephony needs. Here in India, children grew up with, as soon as they were able to use the internet, they used it on their phones. They didn't have dial-up, they didn't have fiber, they didn't have DSL, they didn't go through any of these steps because India, perhaps it wasn't first, but it was actually the first to go build 5G and LTE at the scale at which we have now. And now nearly everybody is able to use their mobile phone and use LTE speeds that are actually faster than a lot of America. I think we'll do the same here with transportation. And that's why we're so excited to launch electric air taxis here, because the roads, given how congested they are, India has an opportunity to leapfrog directly into air taxis. And I think similarly, we'll do the same with a lot of the physical infrastructure here.
Oh, that's interesting, and I think a lot of us out here will say, the quicker you do it, the better it will be for the rest of us. Maria, I wanted to ask you, you are looking at sort of building your business in India at a time when technology jobs are really in a sense of flux, right? We've seen more job losses than new job creation in the tech sector. What do you see as, where do you think where is it going in terms of tech jobs?
Yeah, it's a good question. We've been effectively in a tech recession for the last 2 years, though many don't like to say that. That is what's been happening. We began seeing a decline in Q2 of 2022. However, for the past 5 years, I have known and seen and predicted that India is going to be the future for tech innovation. And came out pretty strong to our board of directors that we needed to spend the next 2 years during the downturn investing in product and R&D and launching globally specific for the India market, which we have done now. So we're officially in the India market. And about 20% of our jobs are in India for technology companies, mostly right now US-based companies. And we are seeing more US-based companies hiring abroad and accelerating job creation abroad. And I do think this will come back. I do think we've seen a decline. There's a significant decline in traditional software engineering jobs. However, with AI, there will be new job creation, right? There's a history from the Industrial Revolution to the digital and internet revolution. When there is a technology revolution, it spurs new job creation in some way, shape, or form. And we're already starting to see it pan out with AI. And so you'll start to see different roles. You'll start to see ethics and systems maintenance roles. In the US, we're about to, California is right, probably going to pass a bill about AI and testing and systems. And so I think you're going to see a lot more job creation as the markets start to accelerate and pick up again. You'll just start to see different jobs. And then you're going to have to see a lot of reskilling, which I think I read an Economic Times article recently that said 86% of tech companies in India are reskilling their workforce. And that's going to become super critical as well.
I think Professor Roubini touched upon this. So will there be more pain before there's gain? I think before we go on to Keshav, maybe that's something that we should, with regard to AI and the transformation that it will bring about in the tech labor market, so to speak. So Keshav, yours is a very interesting example of, sort of coming from a business family and then moving into innovation in the tech sector, riding on the DPI highway, from what I understand. You want to tell us a little bit more about how, the opportunity for creating innovation and change in startups drew you from a family background in business to the tech sector?
Thanks, Archana. I think I have a very interesting vantage point because my family business built infrastructure. GVK built 2 of the best airports in the world. And after that, I obviously love technology, so I'm building on top of the digital public infrastructure, the DPI. And Prime Minister Modi, the entire India Stack team, all based in one neighborhood in Bangalore, have possibly built the most innovative products in the world. Aadhaar has 1.4 billion people on it. You have UPI, now we're doing 15 billion monthly transactions. Account aggregator crossed 100 million transaction data consents. UHI is going to take off. You have every single part of the stack is just blowing up. So we at Equal have just started, 2 years old, and we've crossed 40 million users. Mumbai Airport, when I used to be part of the team running it, we had 60 million users every year. So the digital stack is just going to blow up. The other day, the CEO of NPCI at GFF 2 days ago said, in the next 4 years or 5 years, the number of UPI transactions is going to go to 100 billion monthly. Just imagine, it is the most advanced financial system stack in the world, even better than China's. So I'm super bullish about the DPI, all aspects of the DPI, and couldn't be more excited to build on top of it. And interestingly enough, a lot of value is getting built on top of the DPI. So what they've done really well is they've built the stack and let private companies innovate on top of it. So today, about $100 billion worth of value in startups have been built on top of the DPI, which in the early days was unknown because, the government is doing a lot of the work. So that's super exciting, and I think that's going to really create a wave of new age innovation. And just to add on to that, I think old school, like infrastructure, physical infrastructure will improve, right? We have the best airports in the world. We will have the best roads in the world. We will have all aspects of it because now we are one of the superpowers. So I'm super excited, and I couldn't be more excited than before.
I just want to That's a very ringing validation for India's potential. But on that note, Maria, I just wanted to ask you, just going back to the point you were making with regard to the impact that AI will have on tech jobs, do you think it will be the specialists who will gain, or will it be the generalists? Which way will it go?
I probably don't think about it as specialists and generalists. I'd say it's more your highly skilled tech workers, and then it's going to be human types of roles that support AI, right? And so we're going to have to go back down to the education system and change what majors look like in universities and how we're educating the future workforce to support AI. I think it's going to have to start there, all through up to reskilling. But I do think, this year alone, I think it's projected that AI is going to be about 184 billion, projected to get to about 800 by 2030. So it's significant. And with it will come significant opportunity for new jobs. I think right now we're seeing a lot of it in data scientists, in more specialized roles. But in the US, there's been a lot of noise around AI taking over everyone's jobs. There will be mundane task type work that goes away, but there will be way more highly skilled roles available. And for a market like India that produces such a high volume of highly skilled workers, you're going to see a lot of opportunity.
That's reassuring. Nikhil, I wanted to ask you with regard to regulation, which I think will be a huge aspect in the area that you're working in. The oft understood premise is that technology travels ahead and regulation follows behind, right? Except, of course, in the DPI that Keshav has been talking about, where I think it's stayed in lockstep, and which is why we've seen this huge upsurge in fintech innovation that's come, because the regulation has been in step with the technology. How is it in your space, and what are the, how do you think, how much of a challenge is dealing with regulation for startups, for innovators, and, of course, in your area particularly?
Yeah, it's a great question. Look, in aviation, there is necessarily a lot of regulation, but that's not a bad thing, because aviation has always been, and I suspect always will be, the safest and most low cost per mile way to travel in the world. And in order to be that safe, you have to have that regulation to make sure it continues to be safe. And so there's nothing wrong with regulation. I think what's important is the point you made, is that regulation should stay in lockstep with the technology. When it comes to advanced aerial mobility, I think that's very much been the case all over the world. So in the US, where we're based, the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, is leading the charge. And what that's done is it's brought in regulators from all over the world. In the UAE, we're working with the GCAA, the General Civil Aviation Authority. And then, of course, here in India, we're working very, very closely with the DGCA. And it really helps because a lot of the folks there came from industry. Right? The DG, Mr. Vikram Devdutt, he came from Air India, so he understands what it's like to operate a safe airline. Many of the folks there across the board came from industry and have been deeply engaged with us in conversation, learning about the technology. Of course, our partners Interglobe have been incredibly helpful because they have such a long history there of operating so many airplanes safely. And so for us, what we'll do is we'll continue to work here with the regulators here in India. We'll make sure that we launch as quickly as possible, but also safely as possible. And what that means is establishing our team here, our presence here, being very open and collaborative with all of the test flights that we're doing in the US and globally. And then when we come here, we'll come here at the same time as we will in the US because of all that groundwork that we've laid. That's really, I think, a very pertinent point that a lot of founders kind of struggle with, right? Because a lot of the startup activity in India has been about aggregating disaggregated markets in recent years. So they've come up against a lot of regulatory hurdles, which is why I thought, we should get Keshav to tell us how the fintech revolution has taken off, because, as we said, it's worked in lockstep. So what are the advantages? So do you see that as an advantage that a startup ecosystem must necessarily have?
I'll take a step back, Archana. See, if you think about the Indian tech ecosystem, right? Today, it's the third largest globally in terms of number of companies. About 100,000 companies are born every year, and has the top 125 unicorns have created a value of about 400 billion. Now, 400 billion, the listed company stocks in India is about 3.6 trillion. So about 14 to 15% of the market now is in early stage or tech companies. Everybody's taking notice. Regulators are progressive. Prime Minister was there in GFF the other day. He spoke about AI. I believe he's doing that here too. Everybody's looking forward to innovation in tech, and regulators are fabulous because they understand the nuance, but they have to govern. So I think it's the right thing they're doing. The Reserve Bank is fabulous. I think without that, we have the strongest Reserve Bank in the world. There's no doubt about that. You saw during COVID, they were able to control the currency using both the fiscal policy and the monetary policy. So I think the regulators have done an amazing job. They've moved with the times. India Stack has enabled everyone to do that. Yeah, that's my view. I think they've done a really, really good job.
And what's in terms of being an overseas entrepreneur trying to build a business here, Maria, how do you see this in terms of, one, the talent, and also the ease of doing business, perhaps?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the best way I could say it is 50% of our enterprise buyers are hiring in India today. So I don't think there's an issue doing business in India, and that's why we're here. And when you have about 20% of our mid-market customers, these are customers from, say, 100 to 1,000 employees, this means anyone can do business here, right? And so, yes, of course, to Nikhil's point, in highly regulated industries where safety is a concern, healthcare, right? Things that put lives at risk, you're going to see increased regulation, but you're going to see that globally. That's not India specific. And so there's nothing that tells me that India is any more difficult to do business in as a technology company.
So money has been at the heart of driving startup, activity. And we've seen waves of venture money come into India over the last 10, 15 years. But there's always been this argument that, it's predicated on particular kinds of businesses and not really backing innovation. So, this is a question that I would want all three of you to address. How much of, sort of venture money or the money available to founders should be to go towards testing new ideas and not just sort of building or growing existing businesses? How important is money for innovation, really?
I think it depends on the industry, right? If you are, so I used to help lead the Uber India business, and we started our India office in Bangalore. And it was just incredible to me how efficient the talent was. So, you could hire what we call the 10X engineer here in Bangalore. They could do, for a fraction of the price of one engineer, they were more efficient than 10 engineers sitting in Silicon Valley for 2 or 3X the pay. And I think that efficiency gap is only starting to get larger with AI. And so I would say if you're starting a software company, if you're building a mobile app, it's actually much easier to do that today. And I've actually encouraged a lot of those founders to not go raise venture capital, to say, hey, save up a little bit of your own money, go bootstrap it with you and a couple of friends, and go try to build as much of it as you can using AI yourself, and only then go raise money once you've found product market fit. Now, I think for some industries like mine, like aviation, there's no way around it. You need, not just a lot of money, you need over $1 billion of capital. And the fortunate piece there is I think venture capitalists and investors, particularly in the West, are starting to increasingly see the value of India as a market. I spent the last month working with investors in New York and California and London. We just raised a new round for the company. We've raised about $1.5 billion US publicly to date. And what I can tell you is over the last year, investors were so excited about the Indian opportunity because they look at India and the congestion here. You look at 7% of an average Indian's time is spent stuck in traffic. That's compared to about 4% globally. They see the opportunity and they say, wow, if you guys, can go launch there, that alone is a multi-billion dollar business, tens of billions of dollars of business. And so you're starting to see that capital, particularly in the West, get more excited about the Indian market than I think they have been previously. And so I think for companies that are starting here, that are attacking a large portion of that Indian market, I think they'll find it easier than ever to raise capital.
So I think we're running out of time. So I'll just take the same question again to you, Maria. What are the two top things that you would see for a vibrant startup ecosystem? And then Keshav, your turn.
Yeah, I think the one thing that's really percolating top of mind for me for the India market is you follow the public markets, right? Venture capitalists will always follow the public markets. And so as you see the market caps increase for technology and fintech and renewable energy types of businesses here in India, you're going to start to see increased investment, right? In the US, you know, Tesla's market cap growing has only created more investor interest in that electric vehicle market. And so you're going to start to see that in India. And so those are the industries that I think are going to get a lot of attention, a lot of investor interest. You're also going to see a lot of foreign direct investment into the India market as a result of the market caps growing here. So it's going to start to snowball in a material way. And I think that's what excites us.
So Keshav, how will it snowball? What are the two factors that you think?
In terms of the snowball effect, maybe it's... Hello? Yeah. In terms of the snowball effect, the reality is investors don't know where to invest other than India. And they have to invest in India because every LP is saying invest in India. And the late stage capital is extremely cyclical in India because they're all US global-based funds who listen to their LPs, who basically listen to the inflation rate. So unfortunately, we are all dependent on that for a long duration. But the good thing is the Indian wealth, domestic wealth has increased significantly. You can see that in mutual fund wealth. You can see that in early stage tech. You can see that in all aspects of consumerism. So what's going to happen is what's happened in China. Domestic capital is going to become very strong, and that's going to drive innovation and maybe reduce the reliance of global capital, although global capital is extremely important later stage in the round. So I'm extremely bullish that domestic capital is going to be available more than ever before. And a lot of tech companies are going to start seeing new age, deep tech is getting funded, space tech is getting funded, biotech is getting funded like never before. Research is never funded in India. That's the reality. Now a lot of capital is coming there. So there will be innovation in the next growth. And I think in terms of AI as well, most of the guys in the West are Indian. Most of the guys in SF are Indian. So there is a lot of Indian talent who's there, who's coming back, and they're building here. And that's the excitement. You will see in the next maybe 5-10 years that India is going to be the hub for all innovation. As we touch a $10 trillion economy, that's going to be the place to be. So I studied in the US, and I came back here because I always thought the opportunities were in India.
So domestic money, domestic talent, and market. On that rousing note, thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, what an incredibly inspiring discussion. A big thank you to all our panelists for sharing their journeys, and of course to Archana Rai for moderating such a dynamic conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, can we give them a slightly big round of applause, a warmer one? And if today's discussion is any indication, startups are going to be the new rock stars, constantly redefining the charts and making the rest of us wanting to be part of their bandwagon.
It's all very tricky. I think if that's the plan, I guess I'm going to stick to being the band's manager, mostly because I'm also still trying to figure out how to play air guitar. Oh, but once again, a big thank you to our wonderful panelists and of course to Archana Rai. We're now moving into a session that promises to offer invaluable insights into the world of technology and its impact on our lives. Our next fireside chat features a leader whose work has been at the forefront of the digital innovation in this world. Ambarish Kenge, VP at Google.
That's right. Ambarish Kenge has been a key figure in driving Google's strategic vision and technology initiatives. He has a deep expertise in digital innovation, and he's played a vital role in advancing Google's impact across various markets. Today, Ambarish will be sharing his insights on how technology is driving financial inclusion and enabling even those in rural India to access government programs and empowering citizens to be a part of our larger growth story.
Now, moderating this conversation is Samida Sharma, editor EdTech at the Economic Times. Samida will guide us through an engaging discussion on navigating the future, big tech's role in financial inclusion, regulation, and India's digital transformation. Without further ado, please join us in welcoming Ambarish Kenge and Samida Sharma to the stage.
Thanks. Thank you, everyone. Hi, Ambrish.
Hey, thanks so much for having me here.
So you've
Real me back there, no suits, real technologist.
So you're actually just coming from Global FinTech Fest, which has emerged as a really big event for your sector. I think I'm going to start by asking you, what were the big highlights? A lot of people I spoke to, I missed it because I was here, was that last year the big theme was the funding crunch across FinTech and the larger startup ecosystem. This year, it was all about the regulatory changes that have kind of, become a part and parcel of the FinTech industry in the past year or so. What did you take away from GFF this year?
Yeah, GFF is like a kumbh, right? It is, I don't know how many of you know this, but last year there were 50,000 people. This year on the first day, from what I told, it's first day itself, they had more than 50,000. I think second day, probably like upwards of 80,000 people showed up in the Geo World Center. So it's an amazing festival of things. In fact, the Honorable Prime Minister was there on the last day, on Friday, yesterday. And he talked about it as a festival. He said it's a time of festivals, and this is another festival in this time. But coming back to your question of what was amazing is that there were a ton of launches. One of the sort of big features that we also launched there was UPI Circle, which a lot of you may want to sort of try it out, is be able to delegate payments to your daughter or son or driver so that they're able to use it without you transferring the money. There's a bunch of other features launched. There's a ton of discourse on regulations. Of course, there is a ton of discourse on where India is going, macroeconomy, financial inclusion. So all of these things combined together. Mr. Nandan Nilekani talked about Finternet, which is sort of where do we go from here? What happens to tokenization of land records, assets, stuff like that. So quite an amazing thing. But I tell you something, the biggest thing that happens there is the side conversations. I think there is the stage conversations that happen, but if you come there and you have the side conversations, that's when sort of you get the insights.
So I know you didn't mention what Sameer Nigam, the PhonePe founder, had to say, which is, and you are also grappling with the whole market share issue, the capping of UPI market share, which has been proposed, hasn't been implemented. And Sameer said this out loud, that for them to go and tap the public markets, it's impossible to do so with this uncertainty in mind. I know you do not have to list here, but tell me, as the second largest player in the UPI market, how is this uncertainty played out? The fact that there could be a capping.
So I was telling Samita,
so Ambrish actually told me that, Sameer is a founder. I'm an employee.
Now she's bringing in the backstage conversations in here. But I think, look, Samita, I was telling you, I may play on your name here, and I got your permission backstage somewhat. Right? So Samita means, this Havan ki lakdi, right?
Maybe you're going to put me in the Havan.
No. You're creating the fire. But idam namama, going to the Havan itself. I mean, those of you who do Havan would recognize idam namama because you say that a lot of times. The modern interpretation of it is that, see, these transactions are not for us. It is for the public good and truly for the public good. I think we work on top of a DPI infrastructure. And so you said grappling with market share. There is no grappling with market share. The market is very large. There were, close to 15 billion transactions last month on UPI. So it's a very large market. Very large number of players are playing in it. Now there's been this talk of market share caps and stuff like that. I think, look, the regulators and the government, we can do all kinds of backseat driving. We can say, hey, they should do this, they should do that, or not. But in the end, the regulators and government are balancing a lot of things. Some of it we become privy to because they would say, look, watch out for this or that. But I don't see a challenge with, I think, either sort of, this issue of market share, because I think there is a large number of players who are operating in it, large number of TPAPs, and there is scope for everybody. Now, the thing that we should talk about and worry about it is, are consumers getting what they need? And so is this interoperable, open? We've always stood for open, interoperable systems that are safe. And so let me give you some stats from GPay for that interoperability. In your mind, just think about how many P2M transactions from GPay terminate outside of GPay. Just think about that for a second and then I'll give you the answer. The answer is close to 90%. 90% of P2M transactions from Google Pay are going to some other entity. Now you say, hey, you're just talking about merchant transactions. Of all transactions that Google Pay does, 65% of those transactions end outside of Google Pay. So it's already an interoperable system. It is working like that, and many of you are using different apps. So I think the right things are happening. I have learned over a period of time that you've got very well-meaning system. We are all trying to create growth in a very safe way. So I'm sure the regulators and the government are balancing a bunch of things that we should let them balance.
No, fair point. But can you talk a bit about this whole effort to get more players in? Because between you and PhonePe, it's almost 80-90% of the market. Smaller players aren't seeing that much of an incentive to come and join UPI because obviously there's an MDR issue. You still do not make money on the transactions in a significant manner. So how do you kind of incentivize more fintech players to come into the UPI fold, because it has been dominated by Google Pay and PhonePe for a fairly long amount of time?
Look, you're using words that are like, which is why I rightly said, havan ki lakdi. It's a very pious thing too. But sorry, I took permission once and played on it twice. I'm done with that. I think the thing is, look, we are not the largest player, to be clear, in the market today.
Your market share has come down a little bit, right?
Yeah,
Is that a conscious effort?
No, I think there is more competition, more players in the market. I've lost count of how many TPAPs are out there. TPAPs are third-party applications. And more are coming, actually. Folks who are not in the fintech business are also launching TPAPs. So there is no dearth of more players. There is enough players in the market. There is enough competition. Now, the question of viability, whether they are economically sustainable, I think, and I was mentioning this to Samita backstage also, is that when there is a lot of players running after just that single thing, single market, maybe it's harder because it gets crowded. But there are enough players in the market to keep it safe and secure. The thing that I would urge for startups is, instead of doing the same thing, you should think about what niche do you have? What is the angle, right? When you try to create a business model, you say, why would anybody come to me? And every startup has to think about that and say, what is my unique, what is USP, what's my unique selling proposition, because of which people will come to me, instead of saying, look, somebody else did this, therefore I'm going to do the same playbook. Now, they can be a UPI TPAP, but what is their playbook? Like, what are you bringing? And there's enough money to be made in the ecosystem. It's not true that there's not enough money in the ecosystem. one of our competitors just had a financial report come out, and I think they're making enough money.
So talk a bit about your recent initiatives on the back of UPI. You did launch a few at GFF. And, what more are you doing to kind of, get, different aspects to leverage from UPI?
So, let me take just a couple of steps back for 30 seconds. I think overall, we've had a story that is built on the digital public infrastructure, which has come a long way, right? I don't know how many of you know this, but 2005 is when the Department of Payment and Settlement Systems was, initiated in RBI. 2008 was when NPCI was launched. 2010 Aadhaar came. 2014 Jan Dhan happened. 2016 was a huge surge in internet. 2016 is when UPI also launched. So we've been working on the back of this. Any success is sort of many years in the making. And so payments has been a very big part of it. We have a bunch of use cases there. But now I think, how do you include more people? So UPI Circle is a very good thing where it can include people who may not have bank accounts or who may not be using bank accounts. But beyond this, I think one thing that is very underpenetrated in India is credit, right? I think credit is if you look at whether retail credit to GDP ratios, or if you look at number of credit cards to population, like number of credit card to population in India is like 6-7%. In the US, that number is upwards of 200%. Same thing like retail credit to GDP. Any of these metrics that you take are very underpenetrated. But how do you enable credit in a very responsible way, in a way that keeps the ecosystem secure, it's regulated apps, keeps the lenders secure as well as doesn't over-leverage the consumer. So you're going to see much more stuff here. Artificial intelligence will help a lot. If you're listening to the governor, I was there listening to him when he launched this in Bangalore, but he talked about the new trinity. The old trinity is JAM, Jandan Aadhaar and mobile. The new trinity he talked about was, he said JAM, UPI and ULI. This is unified lending interface. How does the data flow seamlessly, dairy records, dairy pouring records, asset records, land records, stuff like that, account aggregator, all of that comes together. And then can AI work on top of that to enable the right credit to the right person? Today the stat is only 1 in 5 people who can actually are eligible for credit. Only 1 in 5 gets it. If you go to MSMEs, even bigger opportunity. MSMEs, only 1 in 6 will get credit when they can get credit. So there is a huge opportunity to enable it, but we have to enable it in a responsible way. And when we do that, somebody who couldn't get healthcare will get it. Somebody who couldn't, buy the car they want to buy will buy it. Somebody who couldn't buy the Diwali clothes will buy it. And it'll create a sort of resurgence in the nation, which is, and it is already happening, but it'll grow in a way which is incredible. And the last thing I'd say, again, sort of stepping back, is India in 2023 to the world GDP growth contributed 16%. So 16% of the world, 16% of the world GDP growth came from India in 2023. What is your guess? Now, these are not my numbers or Google numbers. These are WEF or IMF and World Economic Forum numbers that you can actually piece together. If you piece them together, what do you think is the amount of, the percentage of growth between 2025 and 2050 that will be contributed by India? So between 2025 and 2050, what is your guess, Samida?
That a guess.
Okay, she doesn't want to answer my questions. But I think if you're just thinking about a guess in your mind, that number is 40%. If you sort of piece these things together. So India is going to be a very large participant in the economic growth of the world. The new growth that is coming, 40% of that between 2025 and 2050 will come from India. Thank you. So I think we have a very large role to play. Credit will play a large role. Payments will play a large role. And one day I think, and hopefully that study happens in saying, look, how much of the economic growth of India has been contributed by UPI. And that'd be an amazing number, I think.
So is there any plan for you to get into, financial services at large in the license space? Because that's something that, you guys have not really entered in India. It's largely been very UPI focused so far. And what was the thought behind that?
Look, I think at least we don't think of license or no license. Actually, what we think of is that what is it that we can uniquely contribute to? If we can, and that's how I think startups or other folks should be looking at. You think about what can you contribute to, and there you say, look, what assets do I have? What capital do I have? What kind of talent I have? What kind of businesses are we in? And then you say, okay, if you want to do this, does it require a license? And if it does, we'll do that. For example, maybe you're not aware of this, but we have a payment aggregator license from RBI.
No, I'm aware,
Yeah. So it's not that we're shying away from licensed businesses, but I think it's about whether there is a use case for it, whether something uniquely that we can contribute to it, and where we can contribute to it, we have actually welcomed whatever needs to be done. And sometimes there are official licenses, sometimes there are sort of approvals that you need to have. So wherever we need to do that, we'll do that, but I think we have to be able to uniquely contribute. There is no reason in everybody going after every license and saying, hey, there is a lot of times startups will say, hey, why don't you give me this license? But unless you're going to use it, there's no value. Just having the optionality of it isn't really useful. So our goal is that don't go after licenses just like that. Figure out the use case. If there is a use case, we work on it and we'll enable it. But the whole idea in the end is work with the ecosystem. We are not a bank, we work with a bunch of banks. Like we are not a lot of things that we'll work with a bunch of folks and then the right things come together for the consumer.
You also have, sort of announced some commitment of about, 10 billion or something a couple of years back. Are you doing a lot of fintech investments? Is that something, that's sort of core focus for you?
Look, the investment that Samida is talking about is a $10 billion fund that we created for India a few years back called India Development Fund. India Digitization Fund, actually. And the idea was that we are able to invest in the ecosystem and startups as well as big companies, and we've made some big investment and small investments across the board. In fintech, we've made a bunch of investments there already. And as we, again, it's not about saying, hey, I want to make a fintech investment. It's about where we see that, okay, this will have an impact. And if there is a strategic alignment on that, then we'll make those investments and definitely making it. The recent one, which is an interesting one that, maybe the most recent one that happened from that is a company called Nama Yatri, which is in the ONDC space. So we are making these investments both internally as well as externally in the DPI and as well as public spaces.
Talk a bit about, I know you just touched upon the AI part. I think again, Shailendra from Peak 15, he was talking about, AI not being used as much in India. Again, this is all GFF conversations. Are you seeing enough of that happening across fintechs and the larger ecosystem compared to, say, US, where
I mean, who am I to debate with Shailendra? We can debate that.
This is what he said.
Yeah. I think the point is, if I can take again a step back, because I was telling Samita also, the goal is you'll remember hopefully a few things and tidbits that I give here. Look, AI is very, very old. It's not new. The term AI was coined by Professor John McCarthy in 1955. Okay, and even Gen AI that people talk about, Gen AI is at least 10 years old, if not more old, because there's a thing called generative adversarial networks that was started in 2014, again a Google paper. Everything that is happening today in the Gen AI space, all the LLMs that we talk about, are based on a technology called Transformers architecture, which was a paper that Google published in 2017. I'm tooting my own horn, but these are all facts. Google published this paper in 2017, which says attention is all you need. If you're Beatles fans, you know what it's a play on. But so that paper has been, so AI has been around for a long time. The use cases of AI have been around for a long time. AI/ML is being used in, for example, fraud detection in a big way. We've been using this in a big way. We announced we probably saved 12,000 crores in the last year just on sort of financial frauds and stuff like saving them. So it is getting used. Look, some of these things take time and then suddenly they take off. But I think AI is being used. Gen AI use cases are also happening. For example, just Google in India, across the board, it is getting assimilated in different products like search, cloud, YouTube, workspace. You're starting to see all of that. And some of this is underneath. A lot of the iceberg is underneath. It is getting used in models in different ways. We are using it, of course, in a big way in fraud and decision making. But you are also seeing the more interesting part is the Gemini, for example, the product is out there, but the model itself is a platform. So you can, any developer can use exactly the same model that is being used internally for using externally. So there are tons of healthcare use cases that are starting to happen in, medicine, as well as creating new set of, pharma and all. In agriculture, there are use cases, education. So you're seeing a bunch of use cases, and I think suddenly they'll explode is what you're going to see.
Very interesting that you brought fraud detection. I mean, that's something that, again, was spoken about a lot and has been, fintech has been at the forefront of sort of getting affected because the regulator also wants, very guardrails to protect, consumers as the transaction numbers go up. How are you using that? Because, again, you're completely consumer focused, with Google Pay. What are the, things that you have implemented to kind of get those checks in place?
So fraud and safety is a super important thing. In fact, the Honorable Prime Minister yesterday at GFF also talked about this topic and said this is really important. And by the way, you create a new, new technique, और उसकी बाल मृत्यु हो जाती है. Because there is like this cat and mouse game. I used this term a couple of times that you guys have to stay ahead of it. Because you should make sure that sort of you don't have sort of a baal mrityu of this attack. So we use it and try to stay ahead. First is that we keep looking at transactions in different ways and say, could this be a fraudulent transaction? And we will warn you and say this might be a fraudulent transaction, depending on the probability and threshold that we have that our AI models tell us. But sometimes we will see that, hey, this seems like definitely fraud. We'll stop that transaction. We say, even if it's a friction, we don't want to let that transaction go through. To my team, there is a clear direction that, let's say you find a pool of thousands of transactions. You say, I don't know which one, but one of them is fraud. I'm like, stop all of them, please, because I don't want anybody to lose their life savings. We will take a little bit of less growth, we will take a little bit of flack on that, but when somebody loses 20,000 rupees, perhaps nobody in this room cares about 20,000 rupees as much, but when somebody loses 20,000 rupees, they lose their life savings at times. And it is incredibly painful, it is hard to sleep with that. And so I think it's very, very, very critical to do that. But we'll keep playing that, keep going after that, and hopefully we'll sort of keep winning this, this war on fraud. The other thing, last thing I'd say is that this is something that Google did a demo of. There's a technology called ScamGuard. That we did a demo at Google I/O, where what happens is, how many of you receive this call saying customs officer is calling, you've got like some problem in there, right? Now, when you get this call, I see some hands go up there. My wife got this call too. Some people got duped of lakhs of rupees, right? Now, problem is you get a phone, they create urgency saying police will catch you, this, that, you suddenly like transfer something. Say, I want to not get into this. But now we're developing technology. Now we did a demo of that, and this is all on device. It is not going to Google. Your calls are not going to Google at all. It's on device, where you can give the consent, enable it, where if you do a conversation, the phone will say, hey, this seems like a scam. Please stop. Worry about this call and don't take an action just because of this. So there is stuff that we'll stay ahead of here.
Thanks, Amrish. We're totally out of time, but I'm sure audience has some questions they can address later on.
Sure.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ambarish, and thank you, Samidha, for sharing your perspectives with us today. And I think their insights into the role technology is playing in shaping India's future was inspiring, it was thought-provoking, it was...
And how do you show your love? You show your love by giving them a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to record these pieces of applause and send it to them, in case you're not clapping.
Right. Ladies and gentlemen, to ensure that you have a clear and enjoyable experience for our next session, I would request the audience members to collect your headphones from the designated headset booth. These will provide you with a seamless translated audio experience throughout our next session. And now we have the distinct honor of hearing from a key figure in India's leadership, Shri Gajendra Singh Shekhawat, Minister of Tourism and Culture. Shri Shekhawat ji, in his role as a Minister of Culture and Tourism, is a strong advocate for leveraging India's rich cultural heritage to enhance its global presence and drive the country's soft power.
Under Shekhawat ji's leadership, the Ministry of Culture has already made significant strides, successfully hosting the 46th session of the UNESCO World Heritage Committee in Delhi last month. His vision emphasizes the integration of cultural preservation with sustainable tourism, aiming to unlock India's vast potential as a premier destination while promoting a deeper understanding and appreciation of our diverse traditions.
And today he's right here to share his vision for Destination India, driving tourism to new heights, where we're going to explore how his forward-thinking approach will shape the future for India's tourism sector. So please join us in giving a very warm welcome to Shri Gajendra Singh Shekhawat on the stage.
धन्यवाद मित्रों. वर्ल्ड लीडर्स फोरम इकोनॉमिक टाइम्स के इस आयोजन में मुझे अवसर प्रदान करने के लिए मैं सबका हृदयपूर्वक धन्यवाद करता हूं, अभिनंदन करता हूं. मित्रों, हमारा देश भारत सदियों सदियों तक विश्व का नेतृत्व करता रहा है. हजारों सालों तक जब मानव के जाति की अन्य सभ्यताएं जब विकास करने के रास्ते पर आगे बढ़ रही थी, तब भी भारत पूरे विश्व के लिए आकर्षण का केंद्र था, कौतूहल का केंद्र था. भारत का ज्ञान, भारत की बौद्धिक संपदा, भारत का वैभव, भारत का ऐश्वर्य, भारत की हस्तकला, भारत की तकनीकी कला, इस सब ने सदियों तक भारत को अपनी तरफ आकर्षित किया. और अनेक अनेक ऐसे उदाहरण हम भारत में देख सकते हैं जहां भारत को जानने के लिए, भारत को समझने के लिए, भारत से ज्ञान प्राप्ति के लिए, भारत से जीवन मूल्यों को समझने के लिए, भारत से धर्म और जीवन पद्धति को सीखने के लिए भारत से विभिन्न भाषाओं के समृद्ध ज्ञान को जानने और पहचानने के लिए भारत में आए लोगों के पदचिन्हों को हम ढूंढ सकते हैं। भारत के विभिन्न कोनों में आपको अनेक ऐसी स्मृतियां आज भी ताज़ा मिलेंगी जहां भारत में दुनिया के अन्य देशों से इस तरह के लोगों का आवागमन होता था। यदि मैं बिजनेस ट्रैवल की दृष्टिकोण से देखूं तो भी भारत में हजारों सालों का इतिहास है कि जब हम सेंट्रल एशिया से और विभिन्न देशों से जब भारत का विस्तार भी आज के भारत से कहीं अधिक हुआ करता था, तब पूरी दुनिया के अनेक देशों के लोग, सभ्यताओं के लोग भारत में व्यापार के लिए, भारत से व्यापार के लिए भारत में आते थे। इसलिए मैं जिम्मेदारी के साथ में एक बात कह सकता हूं कि भारत ऐसा देश है जहां सबसे पुरातन पर्यटन की संभावनाएं थी और पुरातन पर्यटन का अस्तित्व था। हालांकि कालांतर में इसकी कीमत भी चुकानी पड़ी। भारत को जानने पहचानने के लिए जो लोग आए थे, उनमें से कुछ लोग भारत की ज्ञान और भारत की बौद्धिक संपदा से ईर्ष्या के नाते भारत पर आक्रांता के रूप में आए, भारत को लूटने के लिए आए, भारत को परिवर्तित करने के लिए आए, भारत के धर्म के अस्तित्व को मिटाने के लिए आए, भारत की सभ्यता के अस्तित्व को मिटाने के लिए आए। लेकिन सारी चुनौतियों से निकल करके आखिरकार 1947 में भारत आज़ाद हुआ और आज हम आज़ादी के 75 वर्ष पूरे कर सम्माननीय प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी जी के नेतृत्व में भारत को विकसित भारत बनाने के संकल्प के साथ सामूहिक रूप से जुटे। और पिछले 10 वर्ष में जिस तरह से, पिछले 75 साल में मैं ये कहूं कि भारत ने धीरे धीरे जो प्रगति की और पिछले 10 वर्षों ने यकायक भारत ने जिस तरह से प्रगति की छलांग लगाई, भारत में जिस तरह से इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर का डेवलपमेंट हुआ, भारत ने जीवन की हर विधा में जिस तरह से नए बेंचमार्क पूरी दुनिया में स्थापित किए, कटिंग एज टेक्नोलॉजीज और रिक्वायरमेंट्स के साथ में भारत ने आगे बढ़ना फिर शुरू किया। आज उसका परिणाम भारत में तो दिखाई देता ही है, लेकिन साथ ही साथ पूरा विश्व भारत की तरफ एक नए कौतूहल की दृष्टि के साथ देख रहा है। जिस तरह से भारत पिछले वर्षों में माननीय प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी जी के नेतृत्व में किए गए रिफॉर्म्स के चलते हुए पोस्ट कोविड सिचुएशंस में जिस तरह से भारत ने आर्थिक दृष्टिकोण से प्रगति की है, निरंतर लगातार 4 साल से हम जिस तरह से दुनिया की सबसे तेजी से बढ़ने वाली बड़ी अर्थव्यवस्थाओं में के रूप में देश दुनिया में पहचाने गए। और अभी 2 दिन पहले ही मूडीज़ का वापस रेटिंग आया है हमको, जिस तरह से मूडीज़ ने एक बार फिर 7.2% की हमारी ग्रोथ होगी, इसको उन्होंने एक्नॉलेज किया है। भारत का आर्थिक दृष्टिकोण से प्रगति कर रहा है और जिस तरह से भारत ने पिछले वर्षों में प्रगति की है, उसके चलते हुए भारत के प्रति जो आकर्षण विश्व का बढ़ा है, एक बार फिर भारत की पूछ परख वापस होने लगी है। मैं अभी पिछले कुछ दिनों पहले YouTube और Google के वैश्विक स्तर पर काम करने वाले लोगों के साथ में बात करने का अवसर मिला था, मुझे उनके साथ बैठने का सौभाग्य मिला। मैंने उनसे कहा कि गूगल के जो CEO थे, ग्लोबल CEO और एशिया पैसिफिक हेड, मैंने उनसे कहा कि आई जस्ट विश टू अंडरस्टैंड कि 2019 के बाद की सिचुएशंस में भारत के किन विषयों और भारत को देखने के लिए लोगों की उत्सुकता विश्व भर में है। आप मुझे अपने ट्रेंड्स को एनालाइज करके और गूगल एनालिटिक्स के माध्यम से निकाल करके दे सकते हैं। यू विल बी सरप्राइज कि भारत के प्रति, भारत के विभिन्न विषयों, भारत की कल्चरल डाइवर्सिटी, भारत की क्यूजीन, भारत के ट्राइबल जो टूरिज़्म के संभावनाएं हैं, भारत में जिस तरह से मॉन्यूमेंटल टूरिज़्म की संभावनाएं, इन सब के दृष्टिकोण से जो भारत को जानने के लोगों की सर्च जो है ऑन डिफरेंट सर्च इंजन्स और डिफरेंट प्लेटफॉर्म्स, द ग्रोथ इज़ 48%। भारत को लोग देखना चाहते हैं, जानना चाहते हैं। और क्योंकि सम्माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी के नेतृत्व में जिस तरह से हमने पिछले 10 साल में इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर को डेवलप किया, जहां 1,50,000 किलोमीटर से ज़्यादा हाईवेज बनाए, नए ट्रेन ट्रैक्स बनाए, भारत की सारी ट्रेन्स को हमने, रेल रूट्स को हमने इलेक्ट्रीफाई करने का काम किया, वंदे भारत से लेकर के नई एक्सप्रेस और सेमी हाई स्पीड ट्रेन्स को संचालित करना प्रारंभ किया है। भारत में जिस तरह से हमने एविएशन इंडस्ट्री को पूरी तरह से बदलने का काम किया है, पिछले 10 साल के इस कालखंड में एयरपोर्ट्स की संख्या दुगनी हुई है और हवाई यात्रा करने वालों की संख्या कई गुना बढ़ गई है। भारत असीम संभावनाओं के द्वार पर खड़ा है। एक तरफ पूरी दुनिया भारत को जानना और पहचानना चाहती है। यदि मैं दुनिया के परिप्रेक्ष्य में बात करूं, विश्व के जो है टोटल टूरिज्म में कंट्रीब्यूशन में हमारा हिस्सा बहुत छोटा होगा और दुनिया के कंपैरिजन में अगर मैं तुलना करूं तो दुनिया में जो ग्लोबल इकोनॉमी में जो टूरिज्म का टोटल कंट्रीब्यूशन है, डेट इज समवेयर अराउंड 10.4%, उसके कंपैरिजन में आज भी हम 7.9% पर खड़े। लेकिन जिस तरह की संभावनाएं आने वाले समय में मैं देखता हूं, वैश्विक स्तर पर भी देखता हूं और डोमेस्टिक टूरिज्म में भी देखता हूं। पिछले 10 साल तक सम्माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी ने जिस तरह से सामान्य मानवी के जीवन में परिवर्तन लाने के लक्ष्य को लेकर के जो काम किए, गरीब के जीवन में परिवर्तन लाने को लेकर के जो इनिशिएटिव्स लिए और उनको धरातल पर जिस तरह एफिशिएंटली उतारा, आज उसके चलते हुए सभी रिपोर्ट्स ये मानती हैं कि भारत में 25 करोड़ लोग गरीबी की रेखा से बाहर निकल पाए। हमारा मिडिल क्लास सेगमेंट बढ़ रहा है और भारत ऐसा देश है जिसमें दुनिया में सबसे बड़ा इस तरह का जो है एस्पायरेशनल क्लास नए रूप से उदित हो रही है। भारत के लोग ऐसे लोग जिनके वर्षों से, दशकों से, पीढ़ियों से जिनकी इस तरह की उत्कंठाएं कहीं दबी छिपी हुई थी, वो लोग अब बाहर निकल करके अपने देश को जानना और पहचानना चाहते हैं, देखना चाहते हैं, अपनी कल्चरल डाइवर्सिटी को महसूस करना चाहते हैं, अनुभव करना चाहते हैं। और एक नई संभावना हमें डोमेस्टिक टूरिज्म में भी अब हमारे सामने दस्तक दे रही और उसका प्रभाव आने वाले समय में टूरिज्म सेक्टर पर निश्चित रूप से होने वाला है। माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी के नेतृत्व में जिस तरह के इनिशिएटिव्स लिए गए, और मैंने पिछले इस 2-2.5 महीने के कालखंड में मुझे अवसर मिला विभिन्न राज्यों के साथ में बैठने का, उनके साथ चर्चा करने का, क्योंकि अगर मैं राज्यों के दृष्टिकोण से देखता हूं तो इंडिया में टोटल इनबाउंड टूरिस्ट जो आता है उसका 65% 7 स्टेट में आता है। केवल 7 स्टेट हैं जो राजस्थान से शुरू होकर के दिल्ली पर आकर के समाप्त हो जाते हैं। लेकिन जब मैं रीजनल कॉन्फ्रेंसेस में मिनिस्टर्स के साथ में, स्टेट्स के स्टेक होल्डर्स और मिनिस्टर्स के साथ में बैठ करके मैंने बात की, परसों में गोवा में मध्य भारत और पश्चिमी भारत के सभी प्रांतों के राज्यों के मंत्रियों के साथ, उनके सचिवों के साथ में जब मैं बात कर रहा था, मैंने नॉर्थ के लोगों के साथ में बात की, सदर्न इंडिया के, पेनिनसुलर इंडिया के मिनिस्टर्स के साथ में भी चर्चा की, स्टेक होल्डर्स के साथ में भी चर्चा की। मैं जिम्मेदारी से एक बात कह सकता हूँ कि सभी राज्यों में एक हेल्दी कंपटीशन टूरिज्म के डेवलपमेंट को लेकर के अब स्पष्ट रूप से दिखाई देता है। और उसी ताकत के आधार पर मैं कह सकता हूं कि जो हमारा टूरिज्म में कंट्रीब्यूशन इकोनॉमी में हमारा 7.9% के आसपास है, इट इज़ गोइंग टू बी मोर देन 10%। हम ग्लोबल बेंच में जो एवरेज है उससे आगे अगले 5 साल में निकल जाएंगे। आज जो हमारा कंट्रीब्यूशन इकोनॉमी में है, मैं जिम्मेदारी के साथ में एक बात कह सकता हूं कि जिस तरह की संभावनाओं के द्वार पर हम खड़े हैं, आने वाले समय में, आने वाले 5 साल में हम उन सारे संभावनाओं पर काम करते हुए 2047 तक जब भारत विकसित भारत बनेगा, तब उस विकसित भारत की संकल्पना को साकार करने के बड़े ड्राइवर्स में से एक ड्राइवर जो है वो टूरिज्म सेक्टर होने वाला है। भारत में जिस तरह की डाइवर्सिटीज़, भारत में हमारे पास मॉन्यूमेंटल टूरिज्म, अभी चर्चा की जा रही थी कि जिस तरह से हमारे पास में वर्ल्ड हेरिटेज साइट्स हैं, सीरीज़ ऑफ वर्ल्ड हेरिटेज साइट हैं। अभी सरकार बनने के बाद में ही जो है केवल 35 दिन के अंदर हमने वर्ल्ड हेरिटेज कमेटी की मीटिंग भारत में आयोजित की। 2500 से ज़्यादा प्रतिनिधि दुनिया भर के लगभग 165 से ज़्यादा देशों से भारत में आए। और वो ताकत, क्योंकि सम्माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी के नेतृत्व में हमने इस तरह का इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर पिछले दिनों में बनाने में सफलता प्राप्त की थी, इसलिए 35 दिन में हम इतने सारे लोगों को भारत में ला करके और इतना बड़ा आयोजन, एक वैश्विक स्तर का आयोजन। और मैं ये कहूँगा और जिम्मेदारी से कहूँगा कि G20 का कोई भी एक मीटिंग में जितने डेलीगेट्स नहीं आए थे, उससे ज़्यादा डेलीगेट्स और लगातार 10 दिन की उस कार्यक्रम में भारत में उपस्थित रहे। और जितने लोग आए, मुझे विभिन्न अवसरों पर उनके साथ उस 10 दिन के कालखंड में बात करने का अवसर, सौभाग्य मिला था। यूनेस्को की डायरेक्टर जनरल से लेकर के जो रिप्रेजेंटेटिव्स दुनिया के छोटे छोटे देशों से को रिप्रेजेंट कर रहे थे, दे वर अमेज्ड टू सी इंडिया, दे वर अमेज्ड टू रियलाइज द सेंस ऑफ हॉस्पिटैलिटी ऑफ इंडिया। इतना उन लोगों ने अनुभव किया और इतने बड़े, इतने अच्छे शब्दों में उन्होंने भारत की जो अभिव्यक्ति की, ये भारत की ताकत हमें आने वाले समय में दिखाई दे रही है। हमारी हिस्टोरिकल प्लेसेस हैं, हमारे जो फोर्ट्स हैं, पैलेसेस हैं, टूरिज्म में, स्पिरिचुअल टूरिज्म में भारत में हमारा जो पुराना पर्यटन और पर्यटन जो स्पिरिचुअल टूरिज्म के नाम से होता था, उससे आगे बढ़ कर के, क्योंकि भारत की धरती दुनिया के बहुत सारे धर्मों की जननी ऐसी धरती है। आज बुद्धिज्म को लेकर के, बुद्धिस्ट रिलेटेड टूरिज्म को लेकर के भारत में अपार संभावनाएं हैं। हमें उस तरह से इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर को थोड़ा हॉलिस्टिकली उन क्षेत्रों के रूप में डेवलप करने की आवश्यकता है जिसकी चर्चा हम राज्यों के साथ में कर रहे हैं। हमारे पास जंगल है, हमारे पास में वाइल्ड लाइफ है, हमारे पास में इको टूरिज्म की संभावना है, नेचर टूरिज्म की संभावना है, हमारे पास में एग्रो बेस्ड टूरिज्म की संभावना है, हमारे पास में वॉकिंग ट्रेल्स की संभावना है, हमारे पास में कल्चर, म्यूजिक, डांस, क्यूजीन, ट्राइबल टूरिज्म, जो कुछ भी एक टूरिस्ट की अपेक्षा और आकांक्षा हो सकती है। क्योंकि 2019 के बाद में एक ट्रेंड पूरी दुनिया में और बदल रहा है, और वो बदल रहा है कि लोगों का इंटरेस्ट जो है टूरिज्म को लेकर के, क्योंकि वो कोविड के बाद में लोगों के जीवन के मायने बदले हैं, जीवन का सोच बदला है, जीवन के प्रति दृष्टिकोण बदला है, इसलिए जो टूरिज्म से उनका एक्सपेक्टेशन है वो भी बदला है। हमने जो बदलती हुई परिस्थितियां हैं, टूरिज्म का जो बदलता हुआ परिदृश्य है, उसके अनुरूप हम अपने आप को किस तरह से प्रिपेयर करें, इस दृष्टिकोण से हमें काम करने की आवश्यकता है। देयर आर मैनी पॉजिटिविटीज़। अभी कल जब मैं और पुनीत जी जब हम रास्ते में थे फ्लाइट में, हम लोग वर्ल्ड इकोनॉमिक फोरम की रिपोर्ट को हम लोग डिस्कस कर रहे थे। वर्ल्ड इकोनॉमिक फोरम की रिपोर्ट में हमको नो डाउट 190 देशों की उस श्रृंखला में 39th रैंक पर हमको पोजीशन किया गया हिंदुस्तान को। पहले हम कभी 28वें रैंक पर हुआ करते थे प्री कोविड पोजीशन में, लेकिन हम कोविड के बाद में गिर करके शायद 54वें स्थान पर पहुंच गए थे। अभी एलिवेट होकर के पिछले 2 साल में 39th पोजीशन हम पा पाएँ। पिछले 1 साल में भी हमने 10 पोजीशंस की क्वांटम जंप किया है। लेकिन जब उसको आप एनालाइज करो कि वो किन आधारों पर, किन जो है पैरामीटर्स पर इसका जजमेंट करते हैं, अमेरिका, स्पेन क्यों करके शुरुआत से लेकर के अब तक पहले पायदान पर खड़े, अगर उन पैरामीटर्स पर बात करें तो उन सारे विषयों को एनेबलिंग एनवायरनमेंट के दृष्टिकोण से देखें तो हमारे पास में अपॉर्चुनिटीज़ हैं, हमारे पास में इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर एंड सर्विसेज के दृष्टिकोण से बात करें तो भी हम ग्लोबल बेंचमार्क के लगभग बराबर पर पहुंच गए। टीएनटी रिसोर्सेज की बात करें तो हम शायद कहीं उनसे ऊपर खड़े। लेकिन जब उसको और गंभीरता के साथ में देखें तो हम पाएंगे कि जो है ट्रैवल एंड टूरिज्म रिसोर्सेज की दृष्टिकोण से हमारे पास में नेचुरल रिसोर्सेज, कल्चरल रिसोर्सेज हमारे पास में वी हैव ऑल प्रोग्रेस, बट कमी क्या है कि हम उनको ठीक से शोकेस नहीं कर पा रहे हैं, ठीक से कंजर्व नहीं कर पा रहे हैं। रिस्पॉन्सिबल टूरिज्म के ऊपर दृष्टिकोण से हमको काम करने की आवश्यकता है। हेल्थ एंड हाइजीन एक ऐसा विषय है जिस पर अभी भी हमको दो गवर्नमेंट का फोकस है। माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी के नेतृत्व में स्वच्छ भारत अभियान जो है एक जन आंदोलन बना है, पूरे देश का आंदोलन बना है, और देश में एक नई सेंस ऑफ रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी और चेंज ऑफ बिहेवियर इजीली ऑब्जर्व किया जा सकता है, बट स्टिल वी हैव टू वर्क ऑन दैट। इन 2-3 विषयों पर अगर हम काम करें तो उस 10 पॉइंट के स्केल पर जहां हमको 4.24 पर रखा गया है, एंड अमेरिका एंड स्पेन दे स्टैंड्स एट समवेयर अराउंड 5.25 एंड 5.24 पॉइंट्स दे आर सिक्योरिंग। अगर हम आधा 1% के बीच में अगर हम इन चीज़ों पर काम करके एक जंप अगर आगे करें तो मैं जिम्मेदारी के साथ में कह सकता हूं कि इंडिया आने वाले 5 साल में टॉप 10 डेस्टिनेशंस ऑफ द वर्ल्ड में जाकर के खड़ा हो सकता है। अभी फोर्ब्स ने दुनिया के 10 ऐसे देश जो सबसे खूबसूरत देश हैं उनको पब्लिश किया है। उसमें भी हम सब सौभाग्यशाली हैं कि हमको 7वें स्थान पर जगह मिली है। लेकिन मैं जिम्मेदारी के साथ में एक बात कहता हूं कि जिस रास्ते पर हम चल रहे हैं और आने वाले समय में मैं जिस तरह का परिदृश्य देखता हूं, हमारे डोमेस्टिक टूरिज्म की संभावना है क्योंकि हमारे लोगों की खर्च करने की जो ताकत बनी है, और साथ ही साथ में जो पूरी दुनिया का भारत की तरफ देखने का जो आकर्षण बना है और जो नज़रिया भारत की तरफ देखने का बदला है, उसके चलते हुए भारत असीम संभावनाओं के द्वार पर खड़ा है। और आने वाले समय में, आने वाले 5 साल के कालखंड में जो योजनाएं हमने बनाई है, नए डेस्टिनेशंस डेवलप करना, टूरिस्ट का ओवरऑल एक्सपीरियंस को बढ़ाना, इमर्सिव एक्सपीरियंस की नए जो है उसके लिए अवसर प्रदान करना, टूरिस्ट को एंगेजमेंट बढ़ा करके कैसे हम इनबाउंड टूरिस्ट को एक दिन एडिशनल हिंदुस्तान में रुकने के लिए जो है उसको प्रेरित कर सकते हैं, उसको अवसर प्रदान कर सकते हैं, हम कैसे नए टूरिज्म ट्रेल्स एंड अपॉर्चुनिटीज़ खड़े कर सकते हैं, इन सब पर हम सरकार के साथ मिलकर के और प्राइवेट प्लेयर्स के साथ में, स्टेक होल्डर्स के साथ में मिलकर के काम कर रहे हैं। वी आर सीकिंग इन्वेस्टमेंट फ्रॉम द प्राइवेट प्लेयर्स। पीपीपी में डिफरेंट हम नए मॉडल्स बना करके राज्यों को प्रेरित कर रहे हैं कि वो नए टूरिज्म अपॉर्चुनिटीज़ को क्रिएट करें, नए डेस्टिनेशंस को प्रमोट करें, नए एक्सपीरियंसेस को जो है क्रिएट करें। ये सब कर पाएंगे तो 2030 तक आप बदलते हुए भारत में बदला हुआ परिदृश्य पर्यटन के क्षेत्र में देख पाएंगे। हम अपनी कल्चरल ताकत के आधार पर, मैं अंत में सिर्फ इतना कहूँगा कि हमारा देश जिस मार्ग पर आगे बढ़ रहा है, हम दुनिया के शायद इकोनॉमिक सुपर पावर 2047 तक नहीं बन पाएंगे। हम जिस रास्ते पर चल रहे हैं, हमने जिस तरह से अपने देश की सीमाओं को सुरक्षित करने के लिए अपने मिलिट्री पावर में जिस तरह से वृद्धि की, आने वाले 2047 तक भारत इज गोइंग टू बी अमंग द टॉप 10 एक्सपोर्टर्स ऑफ द मिलिट्री इक्विपमेंट्स एंड वेपन्स एंड ऑल। और उसके साथ साथ में जिस तरह से हम टेक्नोलॉजी के क्षेत्र में आगे बढ़ रहे हैं, कटिंग एज टेक्नोलॉजी, चाहे ग्रीन हाइड्रोजन से लेकर के सेमी कंडक्टर तक, हम जिस तरह से स्पेस साइंसेज से लेकर के अर्थ साइंसेज तक जिस तरह से हम प्रगति कर रहे हैं, निश्चित रूप से हम एक दुनिया के ऐसे क्षमतावान देशों की श्रृंखला में तो खड़े हो जाएंगे। लेकिन हमारे पास जो एक विशेषता है, दैट इज़ आवर कल्चरल पावर एंड स्ट्रेंथ। उसके ताकत के आधार पर 2047 तक हम विकसित भारत नहीं, हम केवल विकसित भारत नहीं, दुनिया के सबसे ज़्यादा सम्मानित देश जो हैं उसके रूप में उभरेंगे। इन संभावनाओं के साथ में जब हम सब लोग मिलकर के काम करेंगे, निश्चित ही हम उस लक्ष्य को हासिल कर सकेंगे। आप सबका हृदयपूर्वक धन्यवाद, अभिनंदन। भारत माता की जय।
बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद लेडीज एंड जेंटलमैन, श्री शेखावत जी, शुक्रिया बहुत बहुत फॉर शेयरिंग योर वैल्यूएबल इनसाइट्स सर। मजा आ गया। योर कमिटमेंट टू ट्रांसफॉर्मिंग इंडियाज टूरिज्म and landscape is inspiring.
Absolutely.
And let it all happen by 247.
It will. And it's clear that under your leadership, the potential for growth in tourism is immense. Let's give Shekhawat ji a big round of applause and a big thank you for his valuable address.
You know, Cyrus, after hearing about all these amazing places and plans, I'm feeling like the travel bug is biting me. Like maybe it's time we planned a little getaway.
Bilkul.
We've been working too hard.
Mountains.
Is it? Mountains? Sounds great, but maybe the beach could be more fun too. I'm a beach person.
But then you could also go to a wonderful hill station, which is also lovely right now.
That could be good, but I think a road trip would be perfect.
Oh, road trip would be amazing actually. Or maybe then you just don't do anything and you go to an Ayurvedic retreat. You lie down, you pour oil over you, you cleanse yourself.
So many great options. Maybe we'll just keep exploring ideas till we find the perfect fit.
That's the big problem nowadays. Earlier we had no options, now we have too many options. So after much deduction, I think my holiday is just going to be me being indecisive and sitting over there next to the coffee machine.
Speak for yourself, I'm getting somewhere. But ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure that his speech inspired a lot of different visions of holidays with you. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we have to move on. We're going to be hearing from a leader who has been instrumental in driving innovation and growth in the travel and technology sectors. Ladies and gentlemen, Omri Morgenstern, who is the Chief Executive Officer at Agoda.
Now, Omri has been pivotal in driving Agoda's post-COVID recovery by placing technology and data at the core of its operations. He joined Agoda as a senior product owner for algorithms and learning systems and quickly advanced to Chief Operating Officer. In this role, he oversees global operations, product, partner services, and the customer experience group. Now, prior to Agoda, Omri co-founded Q Laika, a startup focused on online marketing organization where he served as the CEO.
And today, Omri will be sharing his insights on how the Asian market has been pivotal in driving Agoda's growth and innovation. We are looking forward to hearing how regional dynamics and strategic approaches have contributed to the company's success. Please join us in welcoming Omri Morgenstern.
Thank you so much for being here.
Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate the attempt to say clicker, Q-Lika, but I'm past that stage. Thank you. Hello, everybody. My name is Omri. I'm the CEO of Agoda. I'm going to tell you a little bit about our story, how we went from a tiny startup helping backpackers book accommodation in Phuket to a huge global company. And what I'll try is to share nuggets of what I think is maybe non-trivial for you, so maybe, hopefully, some of it will be helpful. So first of all, a little bit about me. So my summary about me is that whatever I thought didn't go according to plan in my life. I graduated a master's in physics in Israel. I thought I'm going to be a physicist in NASA. That didn't happen. I ended up being a programmer. Then at a certain stage, I started my own company with my best friends, moved to Silicon Valley, raised money, I thought I'm going to build a unicorn, a B2B unicorn. Didn't happen. We got an acquisition, an offer we couldn't resist. We took the offer from Booking Holdings. Back then it was Priceline Group, the biggest travel company in the world. They said, go work in Bangkok for us. We have a company called Agoda. That's our Asian field. We said, okay, interesting. In our head, I think we thought 3 years, we get our retention money, we do the best job that we can, another startup in Silicon Valley. That didn't happen as well. Ended up staying for 10 years, and now the CEO of Agoda. One more nugget about me, you see my beautiful family here. Hopefully many of you in the audience, we have the travel bug. So travel drives a lot of our happiness in life. A little bit about Agoda. So as I said, Agoda started in 2002 in Phuket, was acquired by Booking Holdings, back then Priceline Group, in 2007. Fast forward to 2024, Agoda is now a global business with 40 plus offices across mostly APAC, but also outside. You see, we have quite a big presence in Europe and the Middle East, also the US, more than 8,000 employees. And I apologize, I gave you this slide. I wanted to talk about growth, but we are part of a public company, and Booking Holdings doesn't break the performance of everyone separately. So what we compromise is showing this slide, no numbers on the side, but I guarantee you this is a real slide. We just took the y-axis, and the headline is we've been growing about 10x in 10 years, which is remarkable. And when I joined Agoda, it was already quite a big business. We moved from being a regional Southeast Asian business to really a global business. We're the #1 most downloaded OTA, online traveling agency app in APAC, I think number 3 or 4 globally. Tons of app downloads, and this growth still continues as we speak, which is remarkable that we're able to maintain it at this size. And this is where I was trying to think, what can I share with you as an interesting nugget? If you are, say you're an Indian company that wants to go global, what can I tell you that will help you be successful in other countries outside of India? And the reality is, if I'm honest, you don't always know what is the recipe of your success. There are things that you do and things that are external that sometimes you don't even know that are helping you become what you become, and you need to recognize that there is a bit of luck in every strategy. So I just want to start by saying that. I try to pick 3 things that I think are very important. The first one is we're a tech company. Everybody will tell you they're a tech company. So how do you know if it's a real tech company? I'll offer you some tips. One, look who are the C-suite members, who is the CEO. If the CEO is all tech, it's a good area. If not, start being suspicious. How fast do they evolve to tech changes? Like how fast do they use Gen AI as an example? How fast can they tell you what they do and that it's not trivial? Those are all symbols, but it's not easy. But what I can tell you is, why is it important that the basis of whatever you do is tech? The answer is unknowns. Every country we went to, our initial strategy failed, and we had to pivot that strategy to something different. That requires velocity. Velocity comes from tech. If you don't have strong enough tech organization, you cannot adapt. There will be changes coming from the outside, Gen AI again. If you don't have enough of a tech organization, you won't be able to catch up with the curve and you lose. So if you want to be able to maintain, you got to do that. On top of that, and I'll talk about it in a second, there's what we call deep local merchandising, or localization on steroids. That's, for me, what we do when we go to every market. And here are the 2 things for you to think about. Every market you go to, you have 2 problems. Problem number 1 is trust. Nobody knows you, and as a result, they don't trust your service. People don't trust that you will deliver the service that you say that you're going to deliver. 1. Problem number 2 is customer education. In a B2C business, educating customers to do something that they are not used to doing is horrible. Super painful, costly, will slow your adoption curve. What you want to do is bring yourself as much as you can to look and behave like a local brand. Don't educate people. Educate them slowly, slowly. Start being a local. And we'll talk about what it means. Last, I cannot underemphasize the importance of price. Giving the right price to the customer across any industry is the #1 for us, #1 growth driver that I can think about. Every industry is a little bit different, but this will go across everything. So you need to know, and that's a very local exercise, what's the right price. You have to be the price expert in every market that you go to. In the online game, that's a huge, huge, huge operation. So I want to talk a little bit about tech. I want to share one of the problems that we had that I think is interesting. So we started growing our tech center in Bangkok, Thailand. The problem in Thailand, you have great, smart people, but you don't have the experience. Over time, we grew our center. We have a big tech center also in India. What's nice about India is you have the experience, you have everything. You can build everything here, so you don't have that problem. But we had that problem. And what we ended up having to do is to bring that experience from elsewhere. So you see me in Israeli CEO. I was brought, right? People from the US, people from Europe. I can tell you that our number one company that we look for engineers now is OpenAI for the obvious reasons, right? Our talent base is 50% expats that we drag from the city. If you want to be Silicon Valley, hire in Silicon Valley. Otherwise, you won't be Silicon Valley. And we mix them with local talent that what we need from them is smarts, is the brains. And then we mix them together, and that's where the miracle happens. So that's an interesting way how we solved the problem that we had starting in Bangkok. A little bit about what it means to be great in tech. Data. I would say investing in data infrastructure and the speed of accessing data is the one most important thing a tech organization needs to do. Why? Because if you have that, then answering questions, what should I do? How are we doing? Will become easy. You won't wait for the data. Decision cycles will go much faster. So I would push everybody that will ask for my advice to invest as much as they can in storing any data piece. Don't ask. Don't be afraid of the cost. Store, and let anybody access the data as fast as they can to get an answer. This type of investment, and you can see the numbers here, never always paid off to us. You need to think about skills and obviously adapt to disruption like Gen AI. I think I heard Andy Jassy, the CEO of Amazon, say last week that they saved, what he said, 4,500 man-years, developer years in Amazon. So we are counting 150 in Agoda, which is 30x smaller. But considering there are 50x more engineers than us, then I feel we're in the right spot. We are doing well. This is an example of how important it is to adopt new technology. I want to talk about this thing, which is maybe the most important piece in my presentations. How do you localize for a new country or geo that you enter? I marked four things that are really important, and I'll give you examples for them. One is the user experience. The user experience both for the consumer, but also to the supplier. Those need to be localized, again, to make it easy to increase the trust. Marketing, I'm a proponent that a lot of marketing can be actually centralized. It's much more efficient, but certain aspects, especially branding, have to be localized, and I'll demonstrate it. Again, it's this trust component. People need to know that you know them, that you understand their needs, and that's only going to come from heavily localization on that aspect. Payments are super special in APAC, but you understand it in India better than anywhere else. I mean, imagine a company, an online company trying to do business here without supporting UPI. Going to be pretty hard to convince anybody to do business with you, right? So we'll talk about it as well. And last, partnerships. What I'll tell you is, you enter a new market, you need to learn. The best way to learn is from the people in the market. People will say, don't work with the competition. I would say they are exactly the opposite. Work with everybody. There's always a win-win. Your goal is to find a win-win, because out of those connections, you learn. What you want to do is you want to bring your learning to the level of the people in the local area, and then let your engine win, right? And that won't happen without partners, and of course it has to be a win for them. They need to learn from you and improve their operations, right? So I will push everybody. I think a lot of our success was because we've done that, and I'll show you a little bit of that. I want to give you two examples of what it means to make your interfaces. So on the left, what you see here is a Japanese experience. If you want to sell travel in Japan, there are traditional hotels called ryokans. There are traditional Japanese hotels. If you want to be Japanese and you don't sell ryokans, you might as well not go. Ryokans, they sell more of a meal than a room, which is weird. There are so many options for the meal plan. If you tell them the meal plan, pretty much they know where to put you in a room. But try to put the meal plan on the partner portal of Agoda before we enter Japan, no way in hell. And try to sell a meal plan to a customer that wants to stay for the night, no way in hell. So we had to change our partner hub in order to support that type of information, and we had to gradually expose that to consumers. We couldn't let them all the choices that the Japanese wanted them to choose, because it would be overwhelming. So we put one option, two options, and gradually over time, as we got more, customers got more comfortable, we exposed more. That's an example. On the right, you have, I wanted an Indian example for you. What you see, I think on the right, you have Paytm flights. there is this carousel that you've probably seen dozens of times with co-founding of different payment options. Folks, this exists only in India. Nowhere else you see this UI element. This exists across India. Putting something like that is a mandatory if you want to compete in India. Why? Two things. A, it gives better prices. Remember, price is super important. Secondly, every Indian that sees that, even if they don't understand, they think, they know me. We look like somebody that they know. It increases the trust. Again, an example. And there are hundreds of those across different markets. A little bit about the way you do mostly branding, but other marketing campaigns. This, as local as you can go, the better. So you to always use local talent, but it's not enough to use local talent. You need to use local symbols, again, to increase the trust. I'll give you an example. In Indonesia, we use a chicken bank. You know, in many countries, they use a piggy bank. I don't know where I come from. It's like a small pig where you put your money as a key to save. In Indonesia, it's a chicken, right? And that's featured in many of our ads. That's a way for the audience to know that we know them. We know something special about them. So it's not only the actor, it's the narratives, it's the local narratives, and it goes super hyper-local. If you look, this is our Ayushman ad in India, one of them. We use Gen AI to hyper-localize them. So we use Gen AI to change the lips of Ayushman as he speaks, and we change all the content behind him. So for people in Agra, or for people going to Agra, we talk about the Taj Mahal. For people in Goa, obviously, we talk about the beaches. So that's another example how you increase the effectiveness by going very hyper-local. Again, these two things, trust, so important. Payment options. Here, the non-trivial thing that I'll tell you is that the long tail is still incremental. What do I mean by that? You would think, if I have 5 payment options in a destination, why do I need to add number 6 or number 7 or number 8? In our experience, any payment option in the market, even if it has 2 or 3% share, and the people that use it probably have other payment options as well, still adding support to it is incremental to your orders, to your growth. And why is that? 2 reasons. One, you remove friction. People like to use something, they can click and then be done with it, then they like it. 2, remember the trust element. Trust element is they look at it and they say, they support this payment option that is not that common, they must know this market very well. So again, it's the education, removing of friction, and the trust components that are very, very, very important. Partners, I want to say, you see, we work with a lot of partners globally. In every country, we'll work with our competitors, we'll work with our suppliers, we'll work with everybody that is willing to work with us. And the first question that we ask is, where is the win-win? There's always a win-win. And I think the industry benefits and we benefit. I want to talk about governments for a second because it's important. I would push everybody to try to work with the governments. Why? First of all, you've got to be a good citizen. Nowadays, wherever you go, privacy rules are different. Data protection rules are different. Customer protection regulations are different. More and more and more laws that you need to, and you need to know them. You don't want by mistake not to comply with them. You need to be a good citizen, especially as a foreign platform that is operating in a market in the first stages. 1. 2, and that's even more important, oftentimes there's a win-win with the government. For instance, think about us, we're a travel company. We are very aligned with the Indian government. We want to bring more travelers into India. And that opens up a lot of collaboration that is very, very strong and sometimes can be more powerful and impactful than any of the collaborations with private sector partners. Last, I have to say it at the end, price. Whatever you do, if you remember one thing from everything I talked about here, is be a price expert, be a local price expert. And it sounds trivial, it's not. Think about in our case, people are traveling from a destination to a destination, different check-in times, different check-out times, different periods of time, holiday, not holiday. All of those things, so calculating the best position, super, super difficult, but nothing will drive growth on average across industries than giving the best price to the customer. And with that, I'll just say, I'll mention, I looked at it and I thought it's worth mentioning because we call it a purpose statement for Agoda, is bridging the world through travel. And I actually found it to be a good metaphor to how we evolved and localized our product and grew. Because, in a bridge, you have local ends. And you got to understand the local ends to connect. If you don't understand them, it's not going to work. But in between, you have a tech-strong connective tissue that holds the thing together, ideally very tech-savvy, otherwise it will fall, right? So I find it as a good metaphor for what I've seen us doing, and hopefully I've given you something that you can consider as you expand your businesses. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Omri, for those insights. Your perspective on the role of the Asian market in Agoda's growth is enlightening. Thank you so much for that chat.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate your vision and the path you've charted for the industry. Thank you so much for being here. And Minnie, with that, what happens next?
With that, it's time for Pet Puja, a lunch break. There's a delicious spread that's waiting for all of you, so take this time to relax, recharge, and maybe even engage in some strategic networking. You have exactly 45 minutes to get back here, because after the lunch, we have a fantastic session with the gold medalist, Olympic gold medalist, Manu Bhaker. Remember, this event is about connecting, sharing ideas. Don't be shy. Strike up a conversation at lunch. Who knows? The person next to you could be your next big opportunity.
Absolutely. I've been saying this all evening to you, all afternoon actually, Minnie. Now, while you're enjoying lunch, please don't forget to stay connected with all the wonderful and unique updates and sessions and the details using your official WLF app. It is available on both Android and iOS, and it's your one-stop shop for everything that's happening today, except maybe the dessert. The dessert menu, you have to figure out on your own. And please remember to share your thoughts on Instagram, and of course, don't forget to hashtag ETWLF.
Ladies and gentlemen, enjoy your meal. Keep the conversations lively. We'll see you back here in 45 minutes for more incredible sessions. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being such a gracious audience. Enjoy your lunch.